The Greek concept of eudaimonia. Our journey begins not in a book, but in a place. Imagine the sun-drenched stones of the ancient Athenian agora, a sprawling marketplace not just of goods, but of explosive, world-changing ideas. Here, amidst the clamor of merchants and statesmen, history's first great explorers of the human mind wrestled with a question that echoes through our own lives today. What is the true goal of our existence? If we strip away the distractions, the ambitions, the daily struggles, what is the ultimate prize we are all seeking? They gave it a name, a word so rich and profound that our modern language struggles to contain it. Eudaimonia. To call it happiness is like calling the ocean wet. It's true, but it misses the immense depth and power beneath the surface. The word happiness in English suggests chance, a fleeting mood that happens to us if we're lucky. But eudaimonia was something entirely different. It wasn't something you found, it was something you built. The word itself is a code, eu, meaning good, and daimon, a term for one's true inner self, that guiding spirit of our potential. Eudaimonia, then, is the state of living in accordance with your highest self. It is not a feeling of pleasure, but the ongoing experience of human flourishing. The philosopher Aristotle became obsessed with this idea. He argued that everything in the universe has a purpose, a function it is meant to fulfill. A knife's purpose is to cut. A good knife cuts well. An acorn's purpose is to become a mighty oak. So he asked, what is the unique purpose of a human being? His answer was our capacity to reason, to live a life of virtue and intention. Therefore, a eudaimonic life was an active one. It was the life of the craftsman honing her skill, the citizen participating in the life of the city, the individual constantly striving to become a better, wiser, more courageous version of themselves. This wasn't about feeling good in a moment of passive bliss. It was about the deep, soul-level satisfaction that comes from effort, from overcoming challenges, from the conscious act of becoming. This ancient idea is the first major landmark on our map, and it is a towering mountain. It tells us that the greatest joy is found not in comfort, but in challenge, not in receiving, but in building. It's a noble, powerful, and deeply demanding vision of life. And it raises a critical question for all of us who stand at the foot of this mountain. Is this the only path? Must a good life be a constant, arduous climb? Just as this philosophy reached its peak, a challenger emerged from a quiet corner of Athens. He would argue that this grand vision of struggle and public virtue was a mistake. He taught that the key to happiness wasn't found in the bustling agora, but hidden away from the world, in a private garden. And the secret he shared was not about striving for greatness, but about something far quieter, far simpler, and so controversial that his name would be misunderstood for the next 2,000 years.
Epicurus and the Simple Pleasures. The towering ideal of eudaimonia, with its focus on constant striving and public virtue, set a standard so high that it seemed almost unattainable for the ordinary person. It was a philosophy for heroes and statesmen. But as this idea echoed through the halls of Athens, a quiet counter-revolution was beginning. It wasn't in a public square, but in a private space known simply as the garden, led by a philosopher named Epicurus. For centuries, his name has been mistakenly linked with lavish banquets, excessive indulgence, and the frantic pursuit of any and all pleasure. To call someone an Epicurean today is to suggest they are a gourmet, a lover of luxury. But this is a profound distortion of the man's true philosophy, a philosophy so simple and so radical that it was seen as a threat to the established order. Epicurus began with a simple observation. At our core, we are creatures who seek pleasure and avoid pain. This is our biological compass. But where his contemporaries saw this as a starting point for a complex system of virtues, Epicurus saw it as the end goal itself. However, the pleasure he spoke of was not the kind we chase. It was not the thrill of a festival, the taste of exotic wine, or the validation of a cheering crowd. True happiness, he argued, was a state of profound tranquility. He gave it a name, ataraxia, a state of freedom from all mental disturbance. And its physical counterpart was aponia, the absence of bodily pain. For Epicurus, happiness was not something you added to your life. It was your life's default state, what remained when you removed all the things that caused you anxiety, fear, and pain. His garden was a laboratory for this idea. He invited friends, women, and even slaves, a shocking act in Athenian society, to live a simple, withdrawn life. Their goal was to systematically eliminate the sources of human misery. And what did he identify as the main culprits? First, our desires. He brilliantly categorized them into three types. First, the natural and necessary desires, the need for basic food, water, shelter, and companionship. These, he said, are easy to satisfy and bring great pleasure. Second, the natural but not necessary desires, the desire for a gourmet meal instead of simple bread, for a luxurious mansion instead of a simple home. These are harder to satisfy and often bring more trouble than they are worth. And third, the vain and empty desires, which he saw as the poison of the soul, the craving for fame, immense wealth, and political power. These desires are insatiable, based on the opinions of others, and are the primary source of human anxiety. His solution was radical. Fulfill the first type of desire, be very cautious with the second, and completely eliminate the third. He taught that the greatest pleasure was found in having a piece of bread and some water when you are hungry, and the company of a good friend. He argued that the person who needs the least is the richest. The second great source of misery, he taught, was fear, specifically the fear of the gods and the fear of death. He argued that the gods, if they existed, were perfect beings and would not concern themselves with petty human affairs, so there was no need to fear their wrath. And as for death, he offered a simple, powerful, logical argument. Death is nothing to us, for when we exist, death is not present, and when death is present, we do not exist. We can never experience death, so to fear it is to waste the precious present. In this, Epicurus offers a starkly different path on our map. While Aristotle's Eudaimonia is a strenuous climb up a mountain of virtue, the Epicurean path is a quiet walk in a secluded garden. It is a subtractive journey, a process of letting go of the non-essential to find the peace that was there all along. It is a philosophy of contentment, friendship, and quiet joy. And yet, it presents us with a dilemma. We are faced with two powerful but seemingly opposite poles, a life of heroic, world-changing struggle, or a life of peaceful, world-ignoring retreat. Is this the final choice? Must we choose between the agora and the garden? Or is there a third way, a path that navigates the treacherous territory between these two extremes, a path of balance? The very man who gave us the concept of Eudaimonia
also provided the tool to find this middle way. Aristotle's golden mean. Our journey has revealed two competing visions of the good life: the arduous public pursuit of virtuous excellence, and the quiet, private retreat into simple tranquility. One seems too demanding, the other too withdrawn. This is where we return to the brilliant mind of Aristotle, for he understood that the key to a flourishing life, to eudaimonia, wasn't just about defining the goal, but about providing a practical method to navigate the complexities of our daily choices and emotions. He offered a concept so elegant and so enduring that it has become a cornerstone of Western thought: the golden mean. The idea is simple in its statement, but profound in its application. For almost every human action and feeling, there exists a spectrum of possibilities. At the two extremes of this spectrum, you will find a vice. The path of virtue, Aristotle argued, is not found at either extreme, but somewhere in the middle, a mean or a balance point. This is not a call for mediocrity or for being average. It is a call for hitting the bullseye, for finding the perfect response in any given situation. The most famous example is courage. Imagine a soldier on a battlefield. At one end of the spectrum is the vice of deficiency, cowardice. This is the person who is overcome by fear and fails to act when they should. At the other end is the vice of excess, recklessness. This is the person who has too little fear and charges into danger foolishly, endangering themselves and their comrades. The virtue, courage, lies somewhere in the middle. The courageous person feels the appropriate amount of fear, assesses the situation rationally, and acts decisively and correctly. Courage is the golden mean between cowardice and recklessness. Aristotle applied this principle to nearly every aspect of human life. In the realm of pleasure, the excess is self-indulgence or gluttony, while the deficiency is insensibility or an inability to enjoy life's pleasures. The virtue in the middle is temperance. In social conduct, if you are too eager to please and agree with everyone, you are a flatterer, excess. If you are disagreeable and oppose everything, you are cantankerous, deficiency. The virtue in the middle is friendliness. When it comes to generosity, the person who gives away too much is extravagant, excess, while the person who gives too little is stingy, deficiency. The virtue in the middle is generosity. What's crucial to understand is that this mean is not a precise mathematical average. Aristotle was clear that it is a mean relative to us. The right amount of food for a professional athlete is different from the right amount for a sedentary scholar. The courageous action for a trained firefighter is different from that of a bystander. Finding the mean requires wisdom, experience, and self-awareness. It is a skill that must be cultivated over a lifetime. It is learned not by reading a rule book, but through practice, habit, and by observing and emulating people who are virtuous. This concept is a powerful navigation tool on our map. It transforms the pursuit of happiness from a search for a single perfect ideal into a dynamic and continuous act of balancing. It teaches us to avoid the all-or-nothing thinking that so often leads to misery. Life is not about being completely fearless or completely detached. It is about finding the right amount of fear, the right amount of attachment, the right amount of anger, the right way to be generous for the right reason at the right time.
It is a sophisticated dance with life. The golden mean gives us a framework for mastering our own actions. It empowers us to bring order to our inner world. But this raises a terrifying and humbling question. What about the things we have absolutely no control over? How do we find a mean for a sudden illness, a natural disaster, a cruel betrayal, or the inevitable reality of our own death? A philosophy of action requires a counterpart, a philosophy for what happens when action is useless. And for that, our map leads us from Greece to its successor, the mighty Roman Empire.
Stoic Joy in Acceptance. Aristotle's golden mean provides a masterful blueprint for navigating the things we can influence: our choices, our habits, our character. It is a philosophy of the actor, the person who shapes their world. But as the philosophical torch passed from Greece to Rome, thinkers became increasingly concerned with a different, more daunting question. What happens when the world shapes us? When fortune turns against us? When the empire is in chaos? When our bodies fail? When those we love are taken from us? How can one find happiness, or even just peace, in a world that is fundamentally unpredictable and often brutal? The answer came from one of the most resilient and practical philosophies ever devised: Stoicism. Born in Greece but perfected in Rome, Stoicism flourished because it spoke directly to this problem. Its teachers were a diverse group, from Epicurus, a man who had been a slave, to Seneca, a wealthy advisor, to Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, the emperor of Rome. The core of Stoicism is a simple yet life-altering idea known as the dichotomy of control. The Stoics argued that everything in our experience can be divided into two categories: that which is within our control and that which is not. What is not in our control? Almost everything. We don't control the weather, the economy, what other people think of us, our reputation, our health in the long run, or even when we will die. We spend the vast majority of our lives worrying about, complaining about, and trying to manipulate these things, which is, according to the Stoics, the very definition of insanity and the primary source of our misery. What then is in our control? Only one thing: our inner world. Our judgments, our opinions, our values, and how we choose to respond to what happens. Our happiness, they argued, depends entirely on focusing our energy on this single, small sphere of control and learning to accept everything else with a calm indifference. This indifference doesn't mean you don't care. The Stoics called things like health, wealth, and reputation preferred indifference. It's natural to prefer them, but our well-being and our virtuous character do not depend on them. The true Stoic sage could be perfectly content and virtuous whether they were a king or a beggar, healthy or sick, because their happiness was internally sourced. They practiced specific mental exercises to achieve this state. One was premeditation malorum, the negative visualization. They would actively contemplate the worst-case scenarios: losing their wealth, their loved ones, their freedom. The point was not to be morbid, but twofold: to appreciate what they currently have and to mentally prepare themselves for loss, so that if it came, it would not shatter them. Another exercise was the view from above, where they would imagine their own life and problems from a cosmic perspective, seeing themselves on a tiny planet in a vast, indifferent universe, reducing their personal anxieties to their proper scale. But the ultimate goal of Stoicism was not just grim acceptance. It was a kind of robust joy. It was the joy of the unshakable inner citadel, the mental fortress that no external event could breach. It was the serene confidence that you could handle whatever life threw at you. The highest state was what they called amor fati, a love of one's fate. This is the radical idea of not just accepting, but embracing everything that happens, good or bad, as a necessary part of the grand tapestry of the cosmos. It is the joy of knowing that you are playing your part in a much larger story, even if you cannot see the whole picture. Stoicism offers a powerful coordinate on our map, a path to an inner peace that is independent of outer circumstances. It is the philosophy of the warrior, the parent, the leader, anyone who must face a chaotic world with grace and resilience. Yet as we trace this path of radical acceptance, we find a parallel trail being blazed on the other side of the world. In India, another great thinker was wrestling with the same fundamental problem of human suffering. But his diagnosis was different, and his proposed cure was even more radical. He argued that the goal wasn't just to calmly accept suffering, but to extinguish it at its very root, to achieve a state not of peace, but of total liberation.
The Buddha's path to liberation. While the Stoics in Rome were building a mental fortress to withstand the storms of life, a completely different philosophical current was flowing from the East, originating from the insights of a man named Siddhartha Gautama, who would become known as the Buddha, the Awakened One. His journey began not with a logical premise, but with a shocking realization. Born a prince and shielded from all worldly unpleasantness, he one day ventured outside his palace walls and for the first time encountered the raw realities of human existence: an old man, a sick man, and a corpse. This shattered his gilded reality and set him on a relentless quest to understand the nature of suffering and, more importantly, to find a way to end it. After years of extreme asceticism and meditation, he finally reached his moment of awakening, and the wisdom he uncovered forms the very heart of Buddhism. This wisdom is elegantly summarized in what are known as the Four Noble Truths. The first noble truth is the diagnosis of the human condition, dukkha. This is often translated as suffering, but it's a much broader concept. It includes not just obvious pain and loss, but a pervasive sense of dissatisfaction, of things being not quite right. The feeling that even our moments of happiness are fragile and temporary. It is the inherent friction of existence. The second noble truth identifies the cause of this suffering, tanha, which translates to craving, thirst, or attachment. The Buddha taught that our suffering does not come from the external world itself, but from our desperate clinging to things we want and our aversion to things we don't want. We crave pleasant sensations. We crave praise. We crave security. We crave for things to stay the same. And because the nature of reality is impermanence, everything changes, everything ends. This craving inevitably leads to disappointment, frustration, and pain. We suffer because we are trying to hold on to water in a clenched fist. The third noble truth is the prognosis, the message of hope. There is an end to suffering. It is possible to extinguish this flame of craving. This state of liberation is called nirvana. It is not a heavenly paradise you go to after death, but a state of mind that can be achieved right here, in this life. It is the complete cessation of craving and the profound peace that arises from it. And finally, the fourth noble truth is the prescription, the practical path to achieve this liberation. the Noble Eightfold Path. This is a set of 8 interconnected practices that guide a person's life, covering everything from wisdom, right understanding, right intention, to ethical conduct, right speech, right action, right livelihood, and mental discipline, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The path of the Buddha is in many ways a deep psychological journey. It asks us to become scientists of our own minds, to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment, particularly through the practice of mindfulness. Through this clear-seeing awareness, we begin to understand the impermanent nature of all things, including our own sense of self. The Buddha taught the doctrine of anatta, or no self. He argued that the solid, permanent me we believe ourselves to be is an illusion, a temporary collection of physical and mental processes. The realization of this is profoundly liberating, because if there is no permanent self, there is no one to be offended, no one to be attached to outcomes, no one to suffer. This landmark on our map is a radical one. It suggests that the ultimate happiness is found not in adding anything to ourselves, not virtue, not pleasure, not even a love of fate, but in a profound letting go. It is a path of subtraction that leads to a peaceful emptiness, a state of being rather than a state of having. The Buddha's path is a deeply personal, internal journey of awakening. And yet, this raises a question. We are not solitary beings meditating under a tree. We are social creatures. We exist in families, communities, and nations. Is happiness solely an individual's quest for liberation? Or is it something that can only be found with and through others? For that answer, our map takes us to another great civilization of the East, ancient China, and a philosopher who believed that happiness was not an escape from the world, but a deep immersion in our social roles and responsibilities.
Confucian harmony and social happiness. Having explored the deeply personal and internal paths to peace offered by the Stoics and the Buddha, our journey now takes a dramatic turn. We move from the solitary meditator and the Stoic sage to the bustling courts and intricate social structures of ancient China. Here, during a time of great social and political turmoil, a philosopher named Confucius, known to the West as Confucius, offered a radically different vision of the good life. For Confucius, the fundamental question was not, how can I as an individual find inner peace or liberation, but rather, how can we as a society live together in harmony and create a just and stable world? He believed that individual happiness was inseparable from social well-being. You could not be a happy person in a disordered family or a corrupt state. The root of all suffering, in his view, was the breakdown of social order and human relationships. His entire philosophy was a blueprint for how to repair it. At the heart of his teaching were 2 central concepts, Ren and Li. Ren is one of the most important ideas in Chinese philosophy. It can be translated as humaneness, benevolence, or goodness. It is the virtue of seeing the humanity in others and treating them with compassion and respect. It is captured in the Confucian version of the Golden Rule: do not impose on others what you do not wish for yourself. Ren is the inner moral compass, the empathy that connects us to one another. But Ren alone was not enough. This inner goodness needed an outer expression, a practical framework for behavior. This is where Li comes in. Li is often translated as ritual, rites, or propriety. It refers to the vast web of social customs, manners, and responsibilities that govern human interaction. For Confucius, these were not empty traditions, they were the very grammar of a harmonious society. Li defined how a child should respect a parent, filial piety, how a subject should be loyal to a ruler, how friends should treat each other, and how a ruler should care for their people. It provided a clear structure for everyone's roles and responsibilities. The good life, therefore, was a life lived in accordance with Ren and Li. It was about striving to be a junzi, a gentleman or exemplary person. The junzi is not someone born of noble blood, but someone who cultivates their character through relentless self-improvement, education, and practice. The happiness of the junzi is a deep, abiding satisfaction that comes from fulfilling one's roles and responsibilities to the best of one's ability. It is the joy a parent feels in raising a good child, the satisfaction a teacher feels in educating a student, the contentment a citizen feels in contributing to a thriving community. It is a happiness rooted in a sense of belonging and purpose within a larger social fabric. This Confucian path is fundamentally relational. Your identity is defined by your relationships. You are a son, a mother, a friend, a citizen. Flourishing is not a solitary project, it is a collective one. This stands in stark contrast to the Buddhist ideal of detaching from worldly roles to seek individual liberation. For a Confucian, to abandon one's family and social duties would be the ultimate moral failure, the very opposite of a good life. This adds a crucial and challenging coordinate to our map. It insists that we cannot find lasting happiness by ourselves. It tells us that our well-being is intrinsically tied to the quality of our relationships and our contribution to the common good. It is a philosophy of connection, duty, and shared harmony. But even as Confucianism anchored happiness firmly within the social and material world, another great tradition from the Indian subcontinent was pointing in the exact opposite direction. It proposed that the ultimate human goal was not to perfect our role within this world, but to achieve a final, complete liberation from it altogether, to break free from the entire cycle of life and death. The Hindu pursuit of moksha. We have seen philosophies that locate happiness in virtuous action, in simple pleasure, in emotional balance, in social harmony. But our map now leads us to a spiritual landscape of breathtaking scope, one that reframes the entire human project not in terms of a single life, but across countless lifetimes. We journey to the heart of ancient India and the diverse tapestry of thought known as Hinduism. Here, the pursuit of happiness is part of a grand cosmic drama. The central idea is samsara, the beginningless and endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. All living beings are trapped in this wheel of existence, propelled by the relentless law of karma. Karma is not fate or divine punishment. It is a universal principle of cause and effect. Every action, thought, and word generates a karmic residue that determines our future circumstances. Good actions lead to better future lives, while negative actions lead to more difficult ones. Within this framework, there are understood to be four primary goals of human life, the purusharthas. The first is kama, the pursuit of pleasure, sensuality, and emotional fulfillment. The second is artha, the pursuit of wealth, security, and worldly success. The third is dharma, the pursuit of righteousness, moral duty, and ethical conduct. It is the principle that upholds the cosmic and social order. Living a life of good dharma and artha is believed to lead to a better rebirth, a life with more opportunities for kama. For many, this is the extent of the goal, to live ethically and enjoy the rewards in this life and the next. But the great sages of Hinduism identified a fourth, ultimate goal that transcends all others: moksha. Moksha means liberation. It is the final release from the cycle of samsara. It is the ultimate freedom from the suffering, impermanence, and limitation inherent in worldly existence. It is not about reaching a better place like heaven, but about achieving a profound transformation of consciousness. The state of moksha is described as Sat Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, and bliss. It is the realization of one's true nature, the Atman, the individual soul or self, and its fundamental unity with Brahman, the ultimate, formless reality that underlies the entire universe. To achieve moksha is to wake up from the dream of being a separate individual and to realize that one's true self is, and always has been, identical with the divine ground of all being. This is the highest happiness, a boundless eternal bliss that is completely independent of any external circumstances. How is moksha achieved? Hindu traditions offer multiple paths, yogas, suited to different temperaments. There is karma yoga, the path of selfless action, where one performs their duties without attachment to the results. There is bhakti yoga, the path of devotion, where one channels all their emotional energy towards a personal form of God through prayer, ritual, and worship. There is jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, which involves deep philosophical inquiry and meditation to directly apprehend the unity of Atman and Brahman. This concept of moksha adds a vertical dimension to our map of happiness. It suggests that in addition to finding joy within our life, there is a transcendent joy that comes from realizing our connection to the ultimate reality. It is a vision of happiness that is not just psychological or social, but cosmic and spiritual. It posits that our deepest longing is not just for a good life, but for a final homecoming to our true divine nature. This grand multi-lifetime quest for cosmic liberation is perhaps the most ambitious vision of happiness we have encountered, and it prompts a return to a more grounded perspective. While this ultimate spiritual goal is inspiring, what about the practical, day-to-day search for a peaceful mind here and now? Let's journey back to the West, to the Roman world, where thinkers were less concerned with cosmic liberation and more focused on achieving a state they called tranquillitas animi, the unshakable tranquility of the soul.
The Roman ideal of tranquility. After soaring through the cosmic heights of moksha, our journey returns to the practical, often chaotic world of the Roman Empire. Here, amidst political intrigue, military campaigns, and the demands of a sprawling civilization, philosophers were less concerned with escaping the cycle of rebirth and more focused on a deeply sought-after state for this life, tranquillitas animi. This Latin phrase translates to tranquility of mind or peace of soul, and it was the Roman ideal of a life well lived. It is a close relative of the Greek ataraxia and the Stoic concept of apatheia, but with a distinctly Roman flavor. It was less about a complete withdrawal from the world like Epicurus and more about maintaining an inner calm while actively participating in it. The Roman statesman and philosopher Seneca wrote an entire essay on this subject, On the Tranquility of Mind. He describes it not as a state of blissful inaction, but as a stable and robust equilibrium. It is the state of a mind that is not tossed about, that is free from the emotional turbulence of hope and fear, and that finds a steady, continuous joy in its own rational nature. So how did one achieve this coveted state? The Roman thinkers, who were heavily influenced by the Stoics, offered a wealth of practical advice. A key strategy was to manage one's desires and expectations. Seneca observed that much of our anxiety comes from either desiring what we cannot have or fearing what we cannot prevent. The solution was to practice a form of voluntary poverty, to occasionally live simply, eat plain food, and wear basic clothes, even if you were wealthy. This had two benefits. It reduced the fear of losing one's possessions, and it revealed how little one actually needs to be content. Another crucial element was finding the right balance between public engagement and private reflection. The Romans valued public service, but they also understood that a life spent entirely in the public eye could be exhausting and soul-crushing. Seneca advised a kind of strategic withdrawal, alternating periods of intense work and social engagement with periods of solitude, reading, and self-reflection. This solitude was not for idle leisure, but for rearming the mind, for consolidating one's philosophical principles before returning to the fray. A third pillar of tranquility was choosing one's company wisely. The Romans were acutely aware of how the moods and anxieties of others are contagious. Seneca warned against spending too much time with cynical, complaining, or overly anxious people. Instead, one should seek out the company of virtuous and calm individuals who could serve as positive role models. Perhaps most importantly, achieving tranquility required a change in perspective. It meant accepting the fundamental unpredictability of fortune. The Romans used the powerful image of the goddess Fortuna, a fickle deity who spun a wheel, raising some people up and casting others down without reason. The wise person does not try to control the wheel. Instead, they focus on cultivating their inner character, which is the one possession Fortuna cannot take away. They learn to view obstacles not as disasters, but as opportunities to practice virtue, courage, patience, and resilience. This ideal of tranquillitas animi offers a very pragmatic and grounded coordinate on our map. It is a happiness of mental fortitude, of self-possession, and of serene stability in a turbulent world. It is the quiet confidence of a mind that has found its center and cannot be easily shaken. The Roman path to this peace was primarily through reason, discipline, and a rational understanding of the world. But what if the greatest joy, the most profound tranquility, could not be reached through the disciplined mind alone? What if it required a different kind of faculty altogether? A leap of faith, an ecstatic surrender, a connection to something beyond the rational. Our map now leads us into the mystical heart of a great religion, to a tradition that found joy not in controlling the self, but in dissolving it in a divine dance.
The Sufi dance of divine joy. We have charted paths to happiness through reason, through virtue, through social harmony, and through mental discipline. These are philosophies of the mind. But now, our journey takes us to a place where the mind is seen as a beautiful cage, and the key to true joy lies in unlocking it and allowing the heart to take flight. We enter the world of Sufism, the mystical tradition within Islam. For the Sufi, the ultimate reality is God, or Allah, referred to as the Beloved. They see the entire universe as a manifestation of this divine love, and the human soul as a particle of that love, separated from its source. The deepest human yearning, therefore, is the soul's longing to return and reunite with its beloved. All the suffering and dissatisfaction of life, from the Sufi perspective, stems from this sense of separation, from forgetting our divine origin. Consequently, the highest form of happiness is not personal well-being or worldly success, but the ecstatic joy of experiencing this divine union.
This is a state they call phanna, which means annihilation or extinction. It is the annihilation of the false ego self, the I, with all its selfish desires, fears, and pride, into the boundless ocean of the divine. This is not seen as a death, but as the ultimate awakening, a realization that your true identity is one with the beloved. The joy that comes from this state is not a fleeting emotion. It is described as a permanent, intoxicating bliss, a divine love that floods the soul. How does one embark on this journey? The Sufi path, or tariqa, is not primarily an intellectual one. While it has a rich philosophical tradition, its emphasis is on direct, experiential knowledge of the divine. This is a path of the heart. It involves practices designed to polish the mirror of the heart so that it can reflect the divine light. A central practice is dhikr, the remembrance of God. This can involve the chanting of divine names or phrases, often accompanied by specific breathing techniques. The constant repetition is designed to focus the mind, to silence the chattering ego, and to fill every cell of one's being with a sacred presence. Music, poetry, and movement are also vital tools. The great Sufi poet Rumi, whose works have captivated the world, wrote verses that are not just descriptions of divine love, but are meant to induce that state in the reader. His words are a doorway to the mystical experience. Perhaps the most iconic expression of Sufi joy is the whirling dance of the Malevi order, often known as the whirling dervishes. This is not a performance, but a profound, moving meditation. The dervish's white robe represents the shroud of the ego, and as they spin, one hand is open to the heavens to receive divine grace, while the other is turned towards the earth to bestow that grace on creation. The continuous spinning induces a trance-like state where the boundaries of the self dissolve and the dancer experiences a sense of ecstatic union with the cosmos and its divine source. This adds a startlingly different landmark to our map. It is a path of passionate, devotional, and ecstatic happiness. It suggests that the deepest joy is found not in self-improvement, but in self-surrender, not in thinking, but in loving, not in self-control, but in a divine intoxication. It is a path that honors the power of emotion, beauty, and art as direct conduits to the sacred. The intensity of the Sufis' dance toward unity with the divine force presents a powerful image of engaged, active seeking. But what if the greatest wisdom lay in the exact opposite? What if the path to joy was not a passionate dance, but a state of absolute non-action, of effortless alignment with the silent, natural rhythms of the universe? For this final coordinate from the ancient world, our map takes us back to China, to a philosophy of water, valleys, and shadows.
Taoist flow and effortless living. Our journey through the ancient world has shown us paths of striving, of balance, of acceptance, and of ecstatic devotion. Each offers a powerful, active strategy for engaging with life. But our final stop in this ancient landscape presents the most paradoxical approach of all, the path of not striving, the art of effortless action. We return to ancient China to explore the subtle and profound philosophy of Taoism. Its foundational text, the Tao Te Ching, is attributed to a legendary figure named Lao Tzu, the Old Master. At the heart of Taoism is the concept of the Tao, which translates as the way. The Tao is the ineffable, mysterious, natural force that flows through all things, giving rise to the universe and guiding the rhythm of creation. It is the pattern of the seasons, the orbit of the stars, the way a river flows to the sea. It cannot be fully described or understood by the rational mind. It can only be sensed and followed. For the Taoist, all human suffering arises from one fundamental mistake. We resist the Tao. We try to impose our own will, our rigid plans, and our artificial categories onto a world that is inherently fluid, spontaneous, and interconnected. We struggle against the current, trying to force things to be other than what they are. And in this struggle, we exhaust ourselves and create chaos. The secret to a happy and effective life, therefore, is to practice Wu Wei. This is perhaps the most crucial concept in Taoism, and it is often misunderstood. Wu Wei does not mean doing nothing in the sense of lazy inaction. It means effortless action, non-coercive action, or action that does not involve struggle. It is the art of acting in perfect harmony with the natural flow of the Tao. The Taoist sage does not force solutions. They observe the natural tendency of a situation and act in alignment with it. The master of Wu Wei is like a skilled sailor who, instead of trying to row directly against the wind, adjusts their sails to harness the wind's power to carry them to their destination. The imagery of water is central to Taoism. Water is soft and yielding, yet it can overcome the hardest stone. It does not struggle, it simply flows around obstacles, always seeking the lowest ground, and yet there is nothing more powerful. To practice Wu Wei is to cultivate the qualities of water, to be flexible, adaptable, humble, and persistent. Another key Taoist idea is that of Ziran, or naturalness and spontaneity. It is about unlearning the artificial constructs of society and returning to one's own authentic, original nature. It is about trusting your intuition and acting from a place of genuine impulse, rather than from a place of calculated ambition or social pressure. The happiness of a Taoist is not a loud celebratory joy. It is a deep, quiet contentment that comes from being perfectly aligned with the universe. It is the peace of the tree that grows according to its nature, the serenity of the cloud that drifts without a destination. It is the profound effectiveness that comes from ceasing to struggle and allowing things to unfold. This final ancient coordinate on our map is a quiet revolution. It challenges the very foundation of effort and ambition that underlies so many other philosophies. It suggests that true power lies in yielding, true knowledge in embracing mystery, and true happiness in letting go of the need to control. With this, our survey of the ancient blueprints is complete. We have gathered coordinates from Greece, Rome, India, and China. Paths of virtue, simplicity, balance, acceptance, liberation, harmony, and flow. These ancient ideas have provided us with a foundational map. But a map of an old territory is not enough. The world has changed, and so have we. Now, our journey must turn inward. We must leave the ancient world behind and begin to chart the internal landscape of the mind itself, using these ancient clues to explore the very architecture of our own modern experience of joy.
The difference between pleasure and fulfillment. We have returned from our voyage through the ancient world with a map case full of priceless blueprints. We've seen that the good life can be a mountain of virtuous striving,
a quiet garden of simple needs, a balanced dance, or a path of effortless flow. But now the journey turns inward. The map we must now consult is the one etched into our own neural pathways, the inner landscape of our minds. And the first great landmark we must distinguish on this internal terrain are two territories that look remarkably similar from a distance, but are in fact worlds apart: the land of pleasure and the continent of fulfillment. For most of our modern lives, we are encouraged to confuse the two. We are sold pleasure and told it is the key to happiness. Pleasure is the exhilarating rush of a new purchase, the savory explosion of a gourmet meal, the dopamine hit of a social media notification, the passive bliss of binge-watching a favorite show. It is immediate, it is intense, and it is overwhelmingly sensory. It is also, by its very nature, fleeting. Pleasure operates on a simple, ancient system in our brains designed for survival. Seek reward, avoid pain. The problem is that this system has a built-in trap. It's called adaptation. The first bite of cake is divine. The 10th is merely good. The thrill of the new car fades into the stress of the daily commute. The more pleasure we get, the more we need to feel the same level of satisfaction. This is the hedonic treadmill, a relentless chase for the next high, a race we are biologically destined to lose. Fulfillment, on the other hand, is a different kind of country altogether. It is not a peak, but a plateau. It is not something that happens to us, but something we build. Fulfillment is the quiet pride of mastering a difficult skill after months of practice. It is the deep warmth that comes from nurturing a relationship through both good times and bad. It is the profound sense of meaning derived from contributing to a cause larger than oneself. It is the satisfaction of finishing a marathon, not just crossing the finish line, but in every grueling step of training that came before. Unlike pleasure, fulfillment often involves a degree of effort, sometimes even discomfort or sacrifice in the short term. But its rewards are not fleeting. They are cumulative. They don't just give us a momentary good feeling. They add a new layer to our sense of self. They build character, resilience, and a lasting sense of purpose. Pleasure is about adding something to your life from the outside. Fulfillment is about cultivating something from within. This distinction is the starting point for navigating our inner world. It forces us to ask a critical question every time we make a choice. Is this for pleasure, or is this for fulfillment? There is a place for both, but a life built solely on the foundation of pleasure is a house built on sand. Recognizing this difference is the first step. But to truly understand why we are so easily drawn to one and why the other can feel so elusive, we must look deeper at the very engine that drives our seeking, the powerful, complex, and often misunderstood force of human desire.
Desire, detachment, and freedom. Once we distinguish the fleeting territory of pleasure from the lasting continent of fulfillment, we must confront the force that propels us toward both: desire. Desire is the engine of human life. It is the hunger that drives us to eat, the curiosity that drives us to learn, the ambition that drives us to build. It is not an enemy to be vanquished. A life without desire would be a life without motion, without art, without progress. The great thinkers of history, particularly those from the Stoic and Buddhist traditions, understood this. Their goal was not to eliminate desire, but to radically transform our relationship with it. They saw that the raw material of desire itself is neutral, but the way we handle it is the primary source of our suffering. The problem begins when a simple preference, I would like to have a successful career, morphs into a desperate, clinging attachment. I must have a successful career, or my life will be a failure. It is in this clinging, this attachment to a specific outcome, that misery is born. This attachment creates a constant, low-grade anxiety. We live in fear of not getting what we want, and if we do get it, we immediately live in fear of losing it. Our happiness becomes a fragile puppet, and the strings are held by external circumstances far beyond our control. The solution they proposed is the practice of detachment, or non-attachment. This is one of the most misunderstood concepts on our entire map. Detachment is not about becoming a cold, unfeeling robot. It is not about ceasing to care about the world or the people in it. It is the exact opposite. True detachment is the freedom to care, to love, and to act fully without our inner peace being held hostage by the results. Think of it as the difference between playing a game to win and playing for the love of the game. The attached person is obsessed with the final score. Every mistake is a catastrophe, every setback a tragedy. They are so focused on the outcome that they can barely enjoy the process. The detached person, however, pours all their energy into playing with skill, grace, and integrity. They want to win, but their satisfaction comes from the quality of their play. They are free to perform at their best because they are not paralyzed by the fear of failure. This is true freedom. It is not the freedom to get everything you want. It is the freedom from being a slave to your wants. It is the inner spaciousness that allows you to pursue your goals with passion and dedication while holding them lightly. It is the wisdom to understand that your work is to aim the arrow, to perfect your stance, your breath, your release. But once the arrow has flown, its path is no longer in your hands. This is a profound and difficult skill to cultivate. It requires us to retrain the very habits of our mind. And one of the most powerful tools ever discovered for this retraining is a simple, daily practice that shifts our focus from the chasm of what we desire to the vast landscape of what we already possess.
The role of gratitude in lasting happiness. We've established that our relationship with desire is a critical junction on our inner map. Unchecked, the engine of desire can drive us into a state of perpetual wanting, a landscape of dissatisfaction, where our focus is always on what is missing. The practice of detachment offers a way to disengage from this frantic chase. But how do we actively cultivate a different mental state? How do we change the scenery of the mind? The answer lies in one of the simplest yet most transformative mental tools available to us: gratitude. For much of human history, gratitude was seen as a moral or religious virtue, a duty to give thanks to God or to one's benefactors. But in recent decades, modern psychology
has put this ancient wisdom under the scientific microscope, and the findings have been astonishing. The regular practice of gratitude has been shown to be one of the most reliable methods for increasing long-term well-being. It is, in essence, an antidote to the poison of hedonic adaptation we spoke of earlier, where adaptation makes us take the good things in our lives for granted. Gratitude reverses the process. It is the art of not taking things for granted. It is a conscious act of paying attention to the good that is already present. The human brain has what is known as a negativity bias. For evolutionary reasons, we are hardwired to notice threats, problems, and shortcomings. It was a useful survival mechanism on the savannah, but in our modern world, it often translates into a mind that is constantly scanning for what's wrong, what's missing, or what could go wrong. Gratitude is the conscious countermeasure to this bias. It is a form of mental training. By deliberately focusing on what we are thankful for, whether it's something as grand as our health or as small as the taste of a morning coffee, we begin to physically rewire our brains. We create new neural pathways, making it easier and more automatic to notice the positive. This practice does not mean ignoring the difficulties and sorrows of life. That would be mere denial. True gratitude is not about pretending everything is perfect. It is about acknowledging the fullness of life, the coexistence of joy and pain, and choosing to place a greater weight on the good. It is the recognition that even on a difficult day, there are still moments of grace, sources of comfort, and reasons to be thankful. Practicing gratitude is like adjusting the lens of a camera. The world itself doesn't change, but our ability to perceive its beauty and its gifts is sharpened. This shift has a profound effect. It calms the restless engine of desire because it focuses the mind on abundance rather than scarcity. It increases resilience because it provides a reservoir of positive experiences to draw upon during hard times. And it enhances our relationships because expressing gratitude to others strengthens social bonds. It is a foundational skill for lasting happiness, and it reveals a deeper truth about our inner architecture. The raw data of our experience is not as important as the frame we put around it. Our entire reality is colored by the powerful and often invisible lens of our own perspective.
How perspective shapes experience. The practice of gratitude demonstrates a principle of profound importance for our inner journey. Happiness is not determined by the objective facts of our lives, but by the perspective through which we interpret those facts. We do not experience reality directly. We experience a story our mind tells us about reality. And the teller of that story, our perspective, is the most powerful force in shaping our well-being. This idea is a cornerstone of many philosophical traditions. The Stoic emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private meditations, "The universe is transformation. Our life is what our thoughts make it." In the East, a central tenet of Buddhism is that we do not react to events, but to our own judgments about events. Modern cognitive psychology has reached the exact same conclusion, forming the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy. It is our interpretation of a situation, not the situation itself, that governs our emotional response. Imagine two people stuck in the same traffic jam. The first person sees it as a disaster. They are filled with rage and frustration. Their perspective is one of personal inconvenience and injustice. This always happens to me. My day is ruined. The second person sees it as an unchangeable reality of the moment. Their perspective is one of acceptance. They might see it as an opportunity to listen to a podcast, to think through a problem, or simply to practice patience. The external event is identical. The internal experience is completely different. One is a state of suffering, the other a state of peace. Nothing changed except the perspective. Our perspective is a complex lens, ground and shaped by our beliefs, our past experiences, our values, and our assumptions. Much of the time, we are not even aware that we are looking through a lens. We assume that the way we see things is the way they truly are. The great work of building a happier life is the work of becoming aware of this lens and then learning how to consciously clean, adjust, and sometimes even replace it. This is the art of reframing. It is the ability to take a negative event and find the opportunity within it, to see a failure not as an endpoint, but as a lesson, to view a criticism not as an attack, but as valuable feedback, to interpret a challenge not as a threat, but as a chance to grow stronger. This is not about a naive or Pollyanna optimism that denies reality. It is about a disciplined and intentional choice. It is the recognition of our ultimate freedom, what the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl called the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. This is the power to write the story, rather than simply being a character in a story written by external events. It is the understanding that the most important thing that happens to us is not what happens, but the meaning we assign to it. Mastering this skill gives us a profound sense of agency over our inner world. But it also begs a critical question. If our perspective is so powerful, then who exactly is the one who is perceiving? To truly shape our perspective, we must first embark on the most challenging exploration of all, the journey into the center of the self.
The happiness of self-knowledge. We have discovered that our perspective is the master architect of our reality. The ability to reframe our experiences is a key to navigating life with grace and resilience. But this raises a deeper, more fundamental question. If we are to be the architect, we must first know the architect. We cannot wisely shape our perspective without understanding the mind that perceives. This brings us to a crucial point on our map, one inscribed above the entrance to the ancient temple of Apollo at Delphi. Know thyself. The pursuit of self-knowledge is one of the oldest and most profound quests in the history of philosophy, and it is inextricably linked to the pursuit of happiness. For how can we build a life that is right for us if we do not know who us truly is? The happiness that comes from self-knowledge is not a giddy excitement, but a deep, grounding sense of authenticity and alignment. It is the peace of living a life that is congruent with your true values, strengths, and temperament. The journey of self-knowledge is a journey into our own inner wilderness. It involves asking courageous questions. What are my core values? Not the values I think I should have, but the ones that genuinely guide my life. What are my unique strengths? The things that I do well and that energize me. What are my weaknesses, my blind spots, my shadow self, where my insecurities and fears reside? What are my deep-seated beliefs about the world, about myself, about others, and where did they come from? This is not a comfortable or an easy process. It requires a radical honesty that can be unsettling. It means looking at our own contradictions, our own defense mechanisms, and our own patterns of self-sabotage without flinching. It requires solitude, reflection, and sometimes the help of a trusted friend, therapist, or mentor to hold up a mirror for us. But the rewards are immeasurable. Without self-knowledge, we are like a ship without a rudder, tossed about by the winds of social expectation, advertising, and the opinions of others. We chase goals that are not our own. We get into relationships that do not fit us. We follow paths that lead us further away from our authentic selves. And we wonder why we feel empty and unfulfilled. Self-knowledge is the rudder. It allows us to navigate by our own internal compass. It gives us the clarity to say no to the things that are not aligned with our values, and a powerful yes to the things that are. It helps us understand the roots of our emotional reactions, giving us the power to respond with wisdom rather than react with impulse. A person who knows themselves knows their own worth, independent of external validation. They understand their own needs and can communicate them clearly. They are aware of their own emotional triggers and can manage them effectively. This self-awareness is the bedrock upon which a stable and authentic happiness is built. And as we gain a clearer understanding of our own inner workings, we are naturally led to the next crucial skill in our internal toolkit, the ability to manage the very currents of feeling that flow through us.
Emotional balance as a life skill. The journey of self-knowledge illuminates the inner landscape of our minds, our values, our beliefs, our triggers. As this landscape becomes clearer, we become acutely aware of the powerful weather systems that move through it. Our emotions, joy, anger, sadness, fear. These are not good or bad. They are simply energy and information. They are the natural, unavoidable climate of the human experience. A life devoid of them would be a life devoid of color and depth. However, our happiness often depends not on the weather itself, but on our ability to navigate it. A person who is constantly at the mercy of their emotional storms, tossed from the heights of elation to the depths of despair, cannot build a life of stable well-being. This is why the cultivation of emotional balance, or equanimity, is a critical life skill on our map. Equanimity is the art of experiencing our emotions fully without being controlled by them. It is a state of mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. It is not emotional suppression, which is the unhealthy act of bottling up or denying our feelings, nor is it a cold detachment. The person with equanimity feels sadness just as deeply as anyone else, but they are not swept away by it. They feel anger, but they are not consumed by it. They can observe their emotions as if they were clouds passing in the sky of their awareness, acknowledging their presence, their shape, their color, without identifying with them. The cloud is not the sky, and the emotion is not the self. This skill was a central aim of many ancient philosophies. The Stoics sought apatheia, a state of being undisturbed by passions. The Buddhists cultivate upekkha, one of the four sublime states, a powerful balance of mind that is rooted in insight. They all recognized that our reactive emotions are often based on flawed judgments. We get angry
because we believe something should not have happened. We feel anxious because we are projecting a negative outcome into the future. Emotional balance comes from creating a small space between an event and our reaction to it. In that space lies our freedom and our power to choose a wiser response. How is this skill developed? It is developed through practice. It involves learning to pause before reacting, to take a deep breath, to ask questions. What story am I telling myself about this situation? Is it true? Is there another way to look at this? It involves a kind of compassionate self-awareness where we learn to greet our own emotions with curiosity rather than judgment. Ah, there is anger. I feel it in my chest. What is it here to tell me? By relating to our emotions in this way, we rob them of their tyrannical power. They become messengers, not masters. This balance is not a permanent, static state. It is a dynamic skill like learning to ride a bicycle. You will wobble, you will fall, but with consistent practice, you learn to make constant, subtle adjustments that keep you upright and moving forward no matter how bumpy the road. And the single most effective practice for developing this intimate, non-judgmental awareness of our inner world has a name, and it is our next destination.
The power of mindful awareness. We have established that emotional balance is the art of experiencing our feelings without being hijacked by them. This requires creating a space between stimulus and response. But how, in a practical sense, do we create that space? How do we train the mind to pause and observe rather than instantly react? The answer lies in a practice that is both ancient in its roots and revolutionary in its modern application. Mindful awareness, or mindfulness. At its core, mindfulness is the simple yet profound act of paying attention. It is the practice of bringing your awareness to the present moment, on purpose and without judgment. In our normal state, our mind is a time traveler. It is either ruminating on the past, replaying conversations, regretting mistakes, or it is anxious about the future, planning, worrying, fantasizing. We spend very little of our lives in the only moment we ever truly have, right now. And because of this, we miss our own lives. We eat a meal while thinking about a work project. We talk to a loved one while scrolling through our phone. We walk through a park while lost in a mental checklist. Mindfulness is the training to come back home to the present. The formal practice often involves meditation, where you focus your attention on a single anchor, like the sensation of your breath. As you do this, you will inevitably notice that the mind wanders. This is not a failure. This is the moment of practice. The instruction is to simply notice, without criticism, that the mind has wandered, and then gently, patiently, guide it back to the breath, again and again and again. Every time you do this, you are strengthening a mental muscle. You are building the capacity to notice where your attention is and to intentionally place it where you want it to be. This simple exercise has radical implications. By practicing mindfulness, we become intimate observers of our own mental processes. We start to see our thoughts as just thoughts, temporary mental events, rather than as absolute truths. We see our emotions as just sensations in the body, arising and passing away. This creates the very space we have been talking about. An angry thought arises. Instead of immediately identifying with it and lashing out,
The mindful person can observe it. Ah, there is the thought of anger. This observation provides the crucial moment of choice. It allows us to ask, is this thought helpful? Is acting on this emotion wise? Mindfulness is not about emptying the mind. It is about becoming aware of what is already in the mind and relating to it with clarity and compassion. This awareness is the foundation of emotional balance, the prerequisite for shifting perspective, and the key to unlocking a deeper appreciation for the simple reality of being alive. But this inner peace and awareness will inevitably be tested. Life is not always calm. Storms will come. The true measure of our inner architecture is not how we feel when things are going well, but how we hold up when faced with the unavoidable reality of suffering.
Resilience in the face of suffering. We have spent time carefully assembling the internal tools for a happy life. The wisdom to choose fulfillment over pleasure, the freedom of detachment, the perspective-shifting power of gratitude, and the clarifying lens of mindful awareness. We have, in essence, been building a strong and beautiful inner home. But no matter how well built our home is, the storms of life will eventually arrive. Adversity, loss, failure, and pain are not possibilities, they are certainties. They are an inescapable part of the human condition. Therefore, a philosophy of happiness that cannot account for suffering is no philosophy at all. This brings us to the crucial quality of resilience. Resilience is not the absence of suffering. It is not about being untouched by tragedy or having an impenetrable shield against pain. That is not strength. That is numbness. True resilience is the capacity to experience that pain, to grieve, to be broken open by life, and then to rise again, not just back to where you were, but often stronger and wiser than before. It is the psychological equivalent of an immune system. It doesn't prevent you from encountering pathogens, but it allows you to recover and build future resistance. The resilient mind does not ask, "Why did this happen to me?" It asks, "Given that this has happened, what will I do now?" This shift in questioning is the pivot from victimhood to agency. It reclaims the power that lies in our response, the one thing that cannot be taken from us. This idea is central to Stoicism, with its concept of the inner citadel, a mental fortress that external events cannot breach. It is also at the heart of the work of Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, who observed that the inmates in the concentration camps who were most likely to survive were those who managed to find a sense of meaning in their horrific suffering, a reason to endure. This points to a key component of resilience, the search for meaning. Resilient people have a remarkable ability to create a coherent narrative out of their struggles. They reframe their adversity as a challenge rather than a threat. They find the lesson in the loss, the opportunity in the obstacle. This is not about pretending that suffering is good. It is about integrating the experience into the story of your life in a way that fosters growth rather than bitterness. Another pillar of resilience is connection. During hard times, the instinct can be to withdraw and isolate. But research shows that people who maintain strong social bonds, who are willing to be vulnerable and ask for help, recover far more effectively from adversity. Finally, resilience is built upon the very skills we have already discussed. It is our ability to manage our emotional response, to maintain perspective, to practice self-compassion, and to find things to be grateful for, even amidst the wreckage. Resilience is the ultimate test of our inner architecture. It is the quality that allows us to not just survive the storms of life, but to be transformed by them, to let the rains of sorrow water the seeds of a deeper, more profound, and more compassionate joy. And one of the most corrosive forces that can undermine this resilience, one of the most persistent inner storms we face, often comes not from our own misfortune, but from observing the good fortune of others.
Freedom from envy. Having built the strength of resilience to face our own suffering, we must now turn our attention to a more subtle, yet equally destructive inner poison. The suffering we create for ourselves when we look at the lives of others. This is the realm of envy. Envy is the painful feeling of wanting what someone else has, whether it be their possessions, their success, their appearance, or their happiness. The philosopher Bertrand Russell called it one of the most potent causes of unhappiness. It is a uniquely corrosive emotion because it is doubly painful. First, we feel the pain of lacking something we desire. Second, we feel the pain of someone else possessing it, which often comes with a sense of resentment or ill will. Envy is a trap of the comparing mind. It operates on a fundamental illusion that we can accurately assess the totality of another person's life from the outside. In our age of social media, this illusion has become more powerful than ever. We are constantly exposed to a curated highlight reel of other people's lives, their perfect vacations, their career achievements, their beautiful families. We then compare this curated fantasy to the messy, complicated, behind-the-scenes reality of our own lives, and we find ourselves lacking. It is a game that is rigged for misery, because we are always comparing their best with our average. To find freedom from envy is to consciously disengage from this game. The first step is awareness, using the mindfulness we have cultivated. It is to notice the feeling of envy when it arises, without judgment. To simply acknowledge there is envy. This act of naming it robs it of its secret power. It brings it out of the shadows of the subconscious into the light of awareness, where we can examine it. The second step is to use the tool of perspective. When we feel envy, it is because our focus has narrowed to a single point of lack. We must consciously widen the lens. This involves shifting our focus back to our own life and practicing gratitude for what we have. Envy cannot coexist with genuine gratitude. They are mutually exclusive mental states. When you are truly thankful for your own health, your own relationships, your own small joys, the perceived glamour of someone else's life begins to dim. The third and most profound step is to transform the energy of envy. Envy, at its core, is a distorted form of desire. It points to something we value. Instead of letting that energy curdle into resentment, we can use it as information. If you envy someone's musical talent, let it inspire you to practice your own instrument. If you envy someone's fitness, let it motivate you to go for a walk. We can transform envy into admiration, and admiration into inspiration. This is the practice of what is known as mudita in Buddhist philosophy. the concept of sympathetic joy, or finding joy in the happiness and success of others. It is the direct antidote to envy. To be free from envy is to experience a profound liberation. It is to run your own race, to water your own garden, to write your own story. It is the quiet joy of being genuinely happy for others, knowing that their success takes nothing away from your own. And as we clear away this final internal obstacle, we open up the space to not just endure our lives, but to truly and deeply enjoy them. We arrive at the art of fully inhabiting the good moments we do have.
The art of savoring the present. Our journey through the inner architecture of the mind has been a rigorous one. We have learned to distinguish fulfillment from pleasure, to manage our desires, to shape our perspective, to build resilience, and to free ourselves from the poison of envy. We've cleared the ground and built a strong foundation. Now we arrive at the joyful and culminating skill of this inner work, the art of savoring. If mindfulness is about being aware of the present moment, savoring is about lingering in the positive present moments and consciously amplifying the joy they contain. All too often, when something good happens, we barely notice it. We get good news and immediately move on to the next task. We see a beautiful sunset, but are already thinking about what to make for dinner. We have a wonderful conversation, but are distracted by our phone. We rush through our moments of joy, leaving their potential untapped. Savoring is the conscious act of fighting this tendency. It is the deliberate effort to prolong and intensify our positive experiences. It is a form of mindful attention applied specifically to the good stuff. Psychologists have identified several key techniques for effective savoring. One is to share the experience with others. When we tell someone else about a positive event, we get to live it twice. Their enthusiastic response can magnify our own joy. Another technique is to take a mental photograph. This involves consciously pausing during a positive experience and making a deliberate effort to notice all the sensory details, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feelings, so that you can recall it vividly later. This builds a rich inner album of positive memories to draw upon. A third method is self-congratulation. This isn't about arrogant pride, but about allowing yourself to feel a sense of genuine accomplishment and appreciation for your own role in bringing about a good outcome. It is about truly absorbing the feeling of success. Perhaps the most powerful form of savoring is simply to immerse yourself in the present moment. It is to eat a delicious meal slowly, paying attention to every flavor and texture. It is to listen to a piece of music with your full, undivided attention. It is to feel the warmth of the sun on your skin without distraction. The art of savoring is a direct rebellion against the hurried, distracted nature of modern life. It is a declaration that the small, positive moments of our lives are worthy of our full presence. It is the practice that turns a fleeting pleasure into a lasting, joyful memory. It is the final, essential piece of our inner architecture, allowing us to not just build a good life, but to fully inhabit and enjoy it. We have now charted the complex, personal map of the mind. But no mind is an island. This inner architecture we have so carefully designed exists within a larger world, a world of other people. And so our journey must now expand outward. We must take our map and venture into the shared territory, to
to navigate the vast and unpredictable seas of human connection.
The social nature of human happiness. Our journey so far has been a deep dive into the self, an exploration of the internal architecture of a well-lived life. We have polished the lens of perspective, learned to balance our emotions, and built the resilience to weather personal storms. But now, we must lift our gaze. The map of happiness cannot be completed in isolation, because the human being is not a solitary creature. We are, as the philosopher Aristotle declared over 2 millennia ago, a zoon politikon, a social animal. This is not a lifestyle choice. It is a fundamental aspect of our biology. For hundreds of thousands of years, our survival depended on our ability to cooperate, to form tribes, to trust and rely on one another. To be cast out from the group was a death sentence. That ancient wiring remains deeply embedded in our modern brains. We are built for connection. The pain of loneliness is not just a poetic metaphor. It is a real physiological distress signal. Modern neuroscience shows that the experience of social rejection activates the same areas of the brain as physical pain. Chronic loneliness has been shown to be as detrimental to our health as smoking or obesity. This is because, from an evolutionary perspective, a lack of connection is a profound threat. Conversely, a sense of belonging is a primary psychological need, as essential as food and shelter. The joy we feel in the company of trusted friends, the comfort of family, the shared purpose of a community. These are not frivolous bonuses in life. They are the very soil in which human flourishing is rooted. Much of our modern pursuit of happiness is misguided because it is framed as a solo project, a quest for individual achievement and self-sufficiency. We are told to find ourselves, to love ourselves first, as if happiness were a treasure to be unearthed in the cave of our own solitude. But the great thinkers and increasingly modern science point to a different truth. A significant portion of our happiness is located between people. It exists in the quality of our relationships. It is found in the shared laughter, the mutual support, the collaborative effort, the feeling of being seen, understood, and valued by others. Therefore, any map of happiness must have vast territories dedicated to our life with others. This section of our journey is about charting that territory. It requires a new set of skills, not just for managing the self, but for engaging with the world. It is a journey into the heart of our shared humanity. And if we are to truly understand how these life-giving connections are forged and sustained, we must begin with the most fundamental social action, the very glue that binds individuals together and transforms a group of strangers into a community, the act of giving.
The ethics of generosity. If our happiness is fundamentally tied to the quality of our connections, then the next question on our map is, what is the most direct way to build and strengthen those connections? The answer is an action so simple, so universal, that we often overlook its profound power. Generosity.
In almost every culture and philosophical tradition, the act of giving is held up as a virtue. But it is more than just a moral duty. It is a powerful source of joy. There is a deep and fascinating paradox at the heart of the human experience. A life spent in the single-minded pursuit of our own happiness often leads to anxiety and dissatisfaction, while a life that includes a focus on the well-being of others can bring a profound and lasting sense of fulfillment. This isn't just a sentimental idea, it's an observable phenomenon. When we perform an act of kindness or generosity, our brains release a cocktail of chemicals, including oxytocin, sometimes called the love hormone, which fosters feelings of trust and connection, and endorphins, which create a feeling of warmth and euphoria, often referred to as the helper's high. The act of giving is quite literally rewarding. But the ethics of generosity run deeper than a simple chemical reaction. It is a fundamental reorientation of the self. A life lived from a place of scarcity and self-interest is inherently anxious. The world is seen as a competitive arena, and every interaction is a transaction. What can I get out of this? Generosity flips this script. It operates from a mindset of abundance. It sees the world as a place of shared resources and mutual support. It asks a different question: what can I give? This act of giving can take many forms. It can be the giving of material resources, like money or food. It can be the giving of time, through volunteering or simply being present for a friend in need. It can be the giving of knowledge by mentoring someone or sharing a skill. It can even be the giving of attention, the simple act of listening deeply and making someone feel heard. The act of generosity dissolves the hard boundaries of the ego. For a moment, our own problems and desires fade into the background, and we connect with a larger human story. It reminds us of our interdependence and our shared vulnerability. It is a powerful affirmation that we are all in this together. And in doing so, it directly combats the loneliness and isolation that are so toxic to our well-being. Giving builds a bridge from our private inner world to the world of another. It is the first and most essential act in weaving the social fabric. It is the foundation of community. It is a broad, powerful force that connects us to strangers and strengthens our society. But what happens when this general spirit of generosity becomes focused, sustained, and directed toward a specific individual? It evolves into one of the most precious treasures of a well-lived life.
Friendship as a philosophical practice. The spirit of generosity builds a foundation of goodwill in our social world. But upon that foundation, we build more intimate structures, relationships that provide the specific shelter and nourishment our souls require. Of these, one of the most vital is friendship. In our modern culture, friendship is often relegated to the category of a social pleasure, a pleasant but non-essential part of life. For the ancient Greek philosophers, however, friendship was not a luxury, it was a cornerstone of a virtuous and happy life. Aristotle in particular, treated it with immense seriousness, dedicating 2 full books of his Nicomachean Ethics to the topic. He saw friendship as a practice, a skill, and an art form essential for achieving eudaimonia. He brilliantly distinguished between 3 types of friendship. The first is a friendship of utility. In this relationship, 2 people are friends because they are useful to one another. Business partners, for example, or neighbors who help each other with chores. These friendships are often practical and necessary, but they are also fragile. When the utility ends, the friendship often dissolves. The second is a friendship of pleasure. This is a connection based on shared enjoyment, common hobbies, or simply having fun together. Think of a sports team or friends you go to concerts with. These friendships bring great joy, but they too can be transient. When the shared pleasure fades or people's interests change, the bond can weaken. But the third and highest form is what Aristotle called a friendship of the good, or a virtue friendship. This is a relationship between 2 people who admire, respect, and are committed to each other's character. They don't just enjoy each other's company, they actively want what is best for the other person and push each other to become better human beings. This kind of friendship is rare and takes time to cultivate. It is based on a deep knowledge and appreciation of the other person's virtues. In a virtue friendship, the friend acts as a kind of mirror for the soul. They see us more clearly than we see ourselves. They can celebrate our strengths and gently point out our blind spots. They hold us accountable to our own highest values. This is not just a comfortable companionship, it is a philosophical practice. It is a shared journey of mutual growth. The happiness that comes from this kind of friendship is profound. It is the joy of being known and loved for who you truly are. It is the security of knowing there is someone who has your best interests at heart. It is the fulfillment of both giving and receiving support on the path to becoming a better person. It is one of the greatest buffers against the loneliness and hardships of life. This deep, virtuous bond between 2 equals represents a peak of human connection. But our map must also chart another, even more celebrated, complex, and powerful form of human connection, one that has inspired both the greatest art and the deepest tragedies of history.
Love beyond possession. Friendship, in its highest form, is a practice of mutual, virtuous growth. But there is another form of connection that often commands our attention with even greater force: romantic love. No other human experience has been so mythologized, so sought after, and so profoundly misunderstood. Our journey through the landscape of love requires a careful compass, because the territory is filled with treacherous illusions. Much of what our culture presents as love is in fact a form of attachment and possession that is a source of immense suffering. This kind of love is based on need. It comes from a sense of personal lack, a feeling of being incomplete, and it seeks another person to fill that void. This deficiency love is inherently insecure. It is characterized by jealousy, a fear of loss, and a desire to control or possess the other person. The beloved is not seen as a whole, independent human being, but as a source of validation, a mirror to reflect our own worth, or a solution to our loneliness. When they failed to live up to this impossible role, we feel anger,
disappointment, and betrayal. This is not love. It is a transaction, an unspoken contract of mutual need fulfillment. A more profound and philosophical understanding of love frames it not as a feeling you fall into, but as a capacity you cultivate, an art you practice. This is being love. It does not spring from a place of lack, but from a place of fullness. It is the love of a person who is already secure in their own sense of self and does not need another to complete them. Because this love is not based on need, it is free from the fear of loss and the desire to possess the other. It is a love that cherishes the other person's freedom and is dedicated to their growth, even if that growth takes them in a different direction. It is a love that says, "I want what is best for you," rather than "I want you." This kind of love is an active practice of 4 essential elements, as described by the philosopher Erich Fromm. The first is care, a genuine concern for the life and growth of the beloved. The second is responsibility, a readiness to respond to their needs. The third is respect, the ability to see the other person as they are, to accept their unique individuality without trying to change them. And the fourth is knowledge, the desire to understand the other person from their own perspective, a deep and empathetic intimacy. To practice love in this way is a path to profound joy. It is the joy of deep connection without the anxiety of clinging. It is the fulfillment of giving, of contributing to the flourishing of another human being. It moves beyond the fleeting ecstasy of infatuation and into a steady, life-affirming bond. Friendship and love are the most intimate bonds we form. But these relationships do not exist in a vacuum. They are part of a larger social web, and their health, as well as our own, depends on the fairness and integrity of that web.
Justice and collective joy. Our exploration of the shared territory has so far focused on the intimate bonds of generosity, friendship, and love. These are the threads from which we weave our personal support systems. But these individual threads are woven into a much larger tapestry, the fabric of society. And the strength and beauty of that entire fabric depend on a single, crucial principle: justice. Justice is often thought of as a cold, abstract concept, a matter of laws, courts, and punishments. But for philosophers like Plato, justice was the very foundation of a happy society and a happy individual. Plato argued that a just society is one in which all parts are working together in harmony, where everyone is fulfilling their proper role and where there is fairness and balance in the distribution of resources and responsibilities. An unjust society, by contrast, is one rife with conflict, inequality, and distrust. In such a society, individual happiness is precarious at best. It is difficult to feel secure when you live in constant fear of crime or exploitation. It is difficult to maintain a sense of optimism when you see systemic unfairness all around you. It is difficult to trust your neighbor when the social contract is broken. Injustice creates a social environment polluted by fear, resentment, and cynicism. And this pollution seeps into the emotional lives of every citizen. Individual flourishing cannot be sustained on a foundation of collective suffering. The joy we seek is not a private treasure to be hoarded while the world outside is in turmoil. Our well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of our community. This leads to the idea of a collective joy. This is the sense of shared well-being, pride, and security that comes from living in a just and harmonious society. It is the feeling of safety when walking down the street. It is the sense of shared purpose during a community celebration. It is the quiet confidence that the institutions of your society are, for the most part, fair and trustworthy. It is the collective sigh of relief when justice is served. This perspective shifts the pursuit of happiness from a purely individualistic endeavor to a civic one. It suggests that working to create a more just and equitable society is not just a moral duty, but is also a direct contribution to our own well-being and the well-being of those we love. It means that taking an interest in our communities, participating in civic life, and advocating for fairness are all part of a complete philosophy of happiness. The search for a good life is not a retreat from the world, but a full engagement with it. Living in a just society is the passive foundation of our collective joy. But our journey on this map is not a passive one. And so we are led to ask, what is the active principle, the personal action we can take to help build and sustain this just and happy society?
The happiness of contributing to others. We have established that a just society is a prerequisite for a stable and widespread happiness. Justice provides the structure, the fertile ground. But a field, no matter how fertile, does not produce a harvest without the deliberate act of planting seeds. The active principle of a flourishing society and a profound source of individual fulfillment is the act of contribution. This idea takes the concept of generosity one step further. While generosity can be a spontaneous act of kindness, contribution implies a more sustained and intentional effort to use one's unique talents and energy for the benefit of a larger whole. It is the conscious decision to be a part of something bigger than oneself. This is a fundamental human need. We have an innate desire to feel that our lives matter, that our existence has a purpose beyond our own simple survival and pleasure. A life without a sense of contribution can feel empty and adrift, regardless of how much personal success or pleasure it contains. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, building on his experiences in the Holocaust, argued that the primary drive in human beings is not the pursuit of pleasure, but the pursuit of meaning. And meaning, he found, is most often discovered not by looking inward, but by directing ourselves outward, toward a cause to serve or a person to love. The happiness that comes from contribution is deep and durable. It is the satisfaction an artist feels when their work moves someone. It is the pride a teacher feels when they see a student succeed. It is the fulfillment a scientist feels when their discovery benefits humanity. It is the sense of purpose a community organizer feels when they bring people together to improve their neighborhood. This joy is not dependent on praise or recognition, though that can be a pleasant byproduct. The core fulfillment comes from the act itself, from the knowledge that you are using your life's energy in a meaningful way. Contribution connects our individual story to a larger narrative. It transforms our work from just a job into a calling. It gives us a reason to get out of bed in the morning that transcends our own self-interest. This doesn't mean we all need to have grandiose, world-changing careers. Meaningful contribution can be found in any role. It is about the why behind what we do. A janitor who sees their work as merely cleaning floors will find little satisfaction. But a janitor who sees their work as creating a safe and healthy environment for children to learn in
has found a deep sense of purpose. To find our path of contribution is to answer the question, what are my unique gifts and how can I offer them in service to the world? Answering this question and living by its answer is one of the surest paths to a fulfilling life. But this path of connection and contribution is not always smooth. People will inevitably disappoint us, hurt us, and break our trust. And if we are to continue on this shared journey, we must learn to deal with the wounds we receive along the way.
Forgiveness as liberation. Our journey through the shared territory of human connection is an inherently risky one. To love, to trust, to contribute, these acts require us to be vulnerable. And where there is vulnerability, there is the possibility of being hurt. People will betray our trust, act unjustly, and cause us pain, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not. When this happens, we are faced with a critical choice. We can choose to carry the wound, to nurture the grievance, to live in a state of bitterness and resentment. Or we can choose the difficult and often misunderstood path of forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the most powerful and liberating tools on our map, and it is almost always conceived of in the wrong way. We often think of forgiveness as a gift we give to the person who hurt us. We see it as condoning their action, letting them off the hook, or a sign of weakness. But a deeper philosophical understanding reveals that forgiveness is, first and foremost, a gift we give to ourselves. To hold on to resentment is like drinking poison and waiting for the other person to die. It is to remain chained to a past event, allowing it to continue to cause us pain in the present. We replay the offense in our minds, feeding the anger and bitterness, and in doing so, we give the person who hurt us the power to continue hurting us long after the original event is over. It is a form of self-imprisonment. Forgiveness is the act of cutting those chains. It is the conscious decision to let go of the burden of resentment and the desire for revenge. It is an act of reclaiming our own mental and emotional freedom. It is crucial to distinguish forgiveness from reconciliation. Forgiveness is an internal process. We can forgive someone without ever speaking to them again or allowing them back into our lives. Reconciliation is an interpersonal process that requires both parties to work together to rebuild a relationship. And it is not always possible or advisable. One can forgive completely while still maintaining healthy boundaries. The process of forgiveness is not easy. It does not mean forgetting what happened. It means changing our relationship to the memory of what happened. It requires us to acknowledge the pain fully, to grieve the loss, and then to make a conscious choice to release the negative emotions attached to it. It is an act of profound self-compassion. The liberation that comes from forgiveness is immense. It frees up the vast amounts of mental and emotional energy that were being consumed by holding the grudge. It allows us to move forward, to heal, and to open ourselves up to future connections without being held hostage by the wounds of the past. It is the essential act of emotional housekeeping that allows us to navigate the inevitable pains of human relationships and continue our journey with a lighter heart. It helps us repair the damage. But what is the precious material that allows us to build these connections in the first place?
Trust as a foundation of joy. Forgiveness is the tool we use to repair our connections when they are broken. But what is the invisible foundation upon which all healthy and joyful connections are built? It is a quality that is both powerful and fragile, something that can take years to build and only a moment to shatter. Trust. Trust is the essential precondition for a happy life with others. It is the confident belief in the reliability, integrity, and good intentions of another person or an institution. Without it, the shared territory becomes a landscape of fear and suspicion. Imagine a world without trust. Every interaction would be fraught with anxiety. You would have to constantly be on guard, questioning the motives of your friends, your partner, your colleagues. You could not be vulnerable. You could not share your true feelings. You could not rely on anyone for support. It would be a profoundly lonely and exhausting existence. A lack of trust forces us to live behind defensive walls. And while those walls may protect us from being hurt, they also imprison us, cutting us off from the possibility of genuine intimacy and connection. Joy, especially the joy that comes from our relationships, can only flourish in an atmosphere of psychological safety. Trust is what creates that atmosphere. It is the silent understanding that allows us to lower our defenses, to be our authentic selves, to be vulnerable, knowing that we will be accepted and not exploited. It is the bedrock of love, the currency of friendship, and the lubricant of a functional society. Building trust is a slow and deliberate process. It is built in small moments, through a consistent pattern of keeping promises, acting with integrity, telling the truth, and showing up for people when they need you. It is a demonstration over time that your words and your actions are aligned. The joy that trust enables is immense. It is the peace of mind that comes from knowing you can rely on someone. It is the freedom of being able to express your deepest fears and dreams without fear of ridicule. It is the warmth of a bond that feels secure and stable. It is the efficiency and pleasure of working with a team where everyone has each other's back. To trust and to be trustworthy are two of the most important components of a happy life. It is the serious, essential architecture of our relationships. And yet, if our relationships are built only on serious foundations like justice and trust, they can become rigid and lifeless. A flourishing human connection needs one more ingredient, an element of pure, unadulterated, spontaneous delight.
The role of play in human flourishing. Our map of the shared territory has so far charted some very serious and noble lands. Justice, contribution, forgiveness, trust. These are the pillars that give our relationships strength and integrity. But a life built only of pillars would be a solemn and joyless temple. To truly flourish, our connections need light, air, and spontaneous energy. They need the vital element of play. Play is often dismissed as a trivial activity, something for children and not for serious adults. This is a profound mistake. Play is not the opposite of work. It is the opposite of depression. It is a fundamental human need,
and one of the most direct routes to experiencing joy, creativity, and deep social connection. What is play? It is any activity that is done for its own sake, without a specific practical goal or purpose. It is characterized by a sense of freedom, a temporary suspension of normal rules and consequences, and a deep immersion in the present moment. It can be a structured game, a spontaneous joke, a creative hobby, or simply a light-hearted and curious approach to a task. Play is the engine of innovation. It is in the freedom of playful experimentation that new ideas are born and new skills are developed. It is also one of the most powerful ways to build and strengthen social bonds. When we play with others, we engage in a process of shared vulnerability, synchronized action, and mutual delight. The shared laughter of a game or a joke creates an instant and powerful connection, breaking down barriers and fostering a sense of camaraderie. It reminds us not to take ourselves too seriously. The seriousness of adult life, with its responsibilities and pressures, can be crushing. Play provides an essential release valve. It allows us to step outside of our rigid roles and identities for a while, and to connect with a more spontaneous and creative part of ourselves. It recharges our mental and emotional batteries, making us better equipped to handle our serious responsibilities when we return to them. The joy of play is pure and unadulterated. It is the laughter that comes from deep in the belly. It is the thrill of improvisation. It is the deep satisfaction of being fully engaged in a delightful and meaningless activity. A life without play is a life that has lost its spark. To make time for play, both with others and by ourselves, is not an indulgence. It is an essential practice for a flourishing and joyful life. It is a vital current in the sea of human connection. And as we near the shore of this part of our journey, we realize that navigating this sea requires a final, crucial skill, knowing not just how to sail with others, but also when to retreat to our own private harbor.
Balancing solitude and community. We have now charted the vast and complex territory of our life with others, mapping everything from the bedrock of trust to the joyful currents of play. We have seen that we are fundamentally social creatures and that our happiness is deeply intertwined with the quality of our connections. But this raises a final, crucial question for this part of our journey. Is the ideal life one of constant social engagement? Is the answer to simply be surrounded by people at all times? The wisdom of the ages and the insights of psychology suggest a more nuanced answer. The key to a flourishing life is not found in choosing one over the other, but in finding a dynamic and healthy balance between community and solitude. Community, as we have seen, is essential. It provides us with a sense of belonging, support, and shared purpose. It is in our relationships that we find love, practice virtue, and experience the joy of contribution. A life without a strong sense of community is a lonely and impoverished one. But a life without solitude is equally impoverished in a different way. Solitude, in this context, does not mean loneliness. Loneliness is the painful absence of connection. Solitude is the chosen state of being alone, a voluntary and restorative retreat.
It is in these periods of quiet solitude that we can truly process our experiences, connect with our own thoughts and feelings, and hear the voice of our own intuition. It is where the work of self-knowledge, which we explored in the last section, truly happens. Without solitude, our lives can become a cacophony of external voices and demands. We can lose touch with our own values and desires, becoming mere reflections of the people around us. Solitude is the space where we can consolidate our sense of self, recharge our creative energies, and gain a fresh perspective on our lives and relationships. The rhythm between these two states is what creates a whole and healthy life. Meaningful solitude makes our time in community richer because we bring a more centered and authentic self to our interactions. And meaningful time in community makes our solitude richer because it gives us experiences and relationships to reflect upon. The ideal is not a static 50-50 split, but a fluid dance. It is knowing when you need the energy and connection of a crowd, and when you need the peace and clarity of being alone. It is having both a welcoming community to call home and a quiet inner room to which you can retreat. With this final coordinate, our map of the shared world is complete. We have navigated the inner architecture of the mind and the outer territories of human connection. We have gathered wisdom from the ancients. But the world is no longer ancient. We now stand in a new landscape, shaped by radical freedom, new technologies, and unprecedented challenges. Our journey must now advance into the modern era to see how these timeless questions are being viewed through powerful new lenses.
Existential freedom and responsibility. Our journey has taken us from the ancient world, through the inner landscape of the mind, and across the shared territory of our relationships. We have built a map based on timeless principles of virtue, balance, and connection. But as we step into the modern era, the very ground beneath our feet seems to shift. The old certainties of religion, tradition, and social structure that once gave life a clear sense of meaning and purpose have, for many, eroded away. This has left humanity standing in a place of unprecedented and often terrifying freedom. This is the starting point of existentialist philosophy, a powerful lens for understanding the modern human condition. Thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, and Søren Kierkegaard confronted a universe that they believed offered no inherent meaning, no preordained purpose, no divine blueprint for how to live. Sartre famously declared that existence precedes essence. This means we are not born with a fixed human nature or purpose like a knife is made to cut. Instead, we are simply born, we exist, and then, through our choices and actions, we must create our own essence, our own meaning. We are, in his words, condemned to be free. This freedom is radical and absolute. Every moment is a choice, and there are no external guidelines to tell us if we are choosing correctly. We cannot blame God or fate or our biology for the life we create. The responsibility is entirely our own. This can be a source of profound anxiety, what the existentialists called anguish. It is the dizziness of standing at the edge of an infinite possibilities with no safety net. Many of us flee from this freedom. We distract ourselves. We conform to the expectations of others. We pretend we don't have a choice. This is what the existentialists called living in bad faith, a form of self-deception where we deny our own freedom and responsibility. But the existentialists also saw that this radical freedom was the very thing that makes a truly meaningful and happy life possible. If there is no pre-written script, then we are the authors of our own story. The joy of an existentialist life is the joy of authentic creation. It is the deep, empowering fulfillment that comes from consciously choosing your own values, defining your own purpose, and then living a life that is a true expression of those choices. It is the happiness of integrity, of being the sole and proud author of your own existence. This perspective adds a stark and challenging new coordinate to our map. It tells us that happiness is not something to be found, but something to be built from the ground up, with our own hands, in a world that offers no instructions. We must create our own why. But this leads to a difficult and unsettling question. If the universe is truly without meaning, if it is a silent, indifferent void, can this act of personal creation ever be enough? Can we truly be happy in a world that is, at its core, absurd?
Camus and the happiness of the absurd. The existentialists left us with a dizzying freedom, the responsibility to create our own meaning in a meaningless universe. But the philosopher Albert Camus, while often grouped with them, took this idea a step further into a territory he called the absurd. The absurd for Camus is the fundamental conflict between two things: our human longing for meaning, reason, and clarity, and the universe's silent, irrational, and meaningless response. We shout our questions about purpose and justice into the void, and the void does not answer back. This clash between our need for meaning and the world's lack of it is the absurd condition. Camus argued that there are three possible responses to this condition. The first is to escape through what he called philosophical suicide, to take a leap of faith, to adopt a religious or ideological belief system that provides a ready-made meaning and denies the absurd. The second response is literal suicide, to conclude that a life without inherent meaning is not worth living. Camus rejected both of these. He proposed a third way: to revolt, to live in full, conscious awareness of the absurd, without surrendering to it and without escaping into illusion. It is to hold the two conflicting truths in our minds at the same time. I long for meaning, and the universe offers none. And to live defiantly and passionately in that very tension. To illustrate this, Camus used the ancient Greek myth of Sisyphus. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods for all eternity to push a giant boulder up a hill, only to watch it roll back down every time he reached the top. His task is the ultimate in futile, meaningless labor. It is a perfect metaphor for the absurd human condition. We toil, we struggle, we build, knowing that death will ultimately erase all our efforts. And yet, Camus makes a startling and radical claim. At the end of his essay, he writes, "One must imagine Sisyphus happy." How is this possible? Sisyphus's happiness comes from his conscious revolt. In the moment when he watches the boulder roll back down the hill, he is fully aware of the futility of his fate. He is not living under any illusions. And in that moment of lucid awareness, he is greater than his fate. By choosing to walk back down the hill, to pick up his burden again,
He is freely and defiantly embracing his condition. His happiness is not in the task, but in his scorn for the gods who condemned him. It is the joy of rebellion. The happiness of the absurd is a unique and powerful coordinate on our modern map. It is not a gentle contentment or a spiritual bliss. It is a fierce, passionate, and defiant joy. It is the happiness that comes from loving our life in spite of its meaninglessness. It is the freedom of the dancer who continues to dance beautifully, even though the music will eventually end and the hall will be empty. Camus shows us how to find happiness in a godless, meaningless world. But what if we are faced not with a silent universe, but with a world of active, unimaginable suffering? Can meaning still be found there?
Viktor Frankl and Meaning in Adversity. Albert Camus offered us a path to a defiant happiness in the face of a meaningless universe. But his was a philosophical problem. A few years earlier, the psychiatrist Viktor Frankl was forced to confront a far more immediate and brutal form of meaninglessness: the horrific reality of the Nazi concentration camps. Frankl was a prisoner in Auschwitz and Dachau. He lost his parents, his brother, and his wife. He was stripped of everything, subjected to starvation, torture, and the constant threat of death. And yet, in the midst of this unimaginable suffering, he made a profound discovery about the human spirit. This discovery would form the basis of his psychological approach, which he called logotherapy, and which he detailed in his masterpiece, Man's Search for Meaning. Frankl observed that the prisoners who were most likely to survive were not necessarily the physically strongest, but those who managed to hold on to a sense of meaning, a reason to live. It could be the hope of being reunited with a loved one, a piece of scientific work they felt they had to finish, or a deep religious faith. This sense of a future gave them the spiritual strength to endure a present that was otherwise unbearable. From this experience, Frankl concluded that the primary motivating force in human beings is not, as Freud believed, the pursuit of pleasure, or, as Adler believed, the pursuit of power. It is the pursuit of meaning. He argued that we don't invent our own meaning out of thin air, as the existentialists suggested. Rather, meaning is something we discover in the world. He identified three primary sources where we can find this meaning. The first is in creating a work or doing a deed. This is the path of contribution we have already explored, finding purpose through our actions and our creative efforts. The second is in experiencing something or encountering someone. This is the meaning we find in the beauty of nature, in art, or, most importantly, in the experience of love. To love another person is to see their potential and to help them actualize it, a deeply meaningful act. But Frankl's most radical and powerful insight was the third source: the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. He argued that when we are faced with a situation we cannot change, like an incurable disease or the loss of a loved one, we are challenged to find meaning in the way we face that suffering. Our suffering ceases to be suffering, he wrote, at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. The courage, dignity, and compassion we bring to our suffering can transform a personal tragedy into a triumph of the human spirit. Frankl's work adds an essential and deeply humane coordinate to our map. It provides a bridge from the abstract freedom of existentialism
to a concrete, livable path. It tells us that happiness is often a byproduct of a life dedicated to meaning. And it offers a profound message of hope, that even in the darkest of circumstances, we retain the ultimate freedom to choose our attitude and, in doing so, to find a meaning that can light our way. This focus on the positive, on what makes life worth living, would soon become the central concern of a whole new branch of psychology.
Positive psychology's science of well-being. For most of its history, psychology was primarily concerned with what was wrong with the human mind. It focused on mental illness, trauma, and dysfunction. Its model was a medical one, to diagnose and treat pathology, to move people from a state of suffering to a neutral baseline. It was a science of fixing what was broken. But in the late 1990s, a group of psychologists led by Martin Seligman began to ask a revolutionary question. What if we studied what was right with people? What if instead of just figuring out how to get people from a -8 to a 0, we studied how to get people from a +2 to a +8? What if we developed a rigorous science of human flourishing? This was the birth of positive psychology. It was a deliberate shift in perspective. Instead of studying a patient's weaknesses, it studied their strengths. Instead of focusing on what makes life unbearable, it focused on what makes life worth living. It took the timeless questions about happiness and the good life that we have been exploring on our map and subjected them to the rigors of the scientific method. Controlled studies, longitudinal data, and empirical evidence. Positive psychology did not invent new ideas so much as it tested the ancient ones. The wisdom of Aristotle, the Stoics, and the Buddha was now being examined in the laboratory, and the results were fascinating. The field confirmed, for example, the profound impact of gratitude on well-being, the power of generosity, and the importance of strong social connections. But it also developed new models and frameworks. One of the most influential is Seligman's PERMA model of well-being. He argues that human flourishing is made up of 5 key elements. The first is positive emotion, experiencing feelings like joy, contentment, and warmth. The second is engagement, the feeling of being completely absorbed in a challenging and rewarding activity, which we will explore later as flow. The third is relationships, the social connections that we know are vital. The fourth is meaning, belonging to and serving something that you believe is bigger than the self, echoing Viktor Frankl's work. And the fifth is accomplishment, the pursuit of success, mastery, and achievement for its own sake. Positive psychology provides a new kind of lens for our map. It is a lens of scientific inquiry. It allows us to move beyond philosophical speculation and to identify the specific, evidence-based habits and mindsets that are statistically likely to increase our well-being. It has given us a new language of character strengths, of savoring, of optimism, and of resilience. It is a powerful and practical modern tool. But in its quest to understand what makes us happy, this new science also stumbled upon one of the biggest paradoxes, a built-in feature of our psychology that makes lasting happiness so incredibly difficult to achieve. Hedonic adaptation. Why joy fades. As positive psychology began to scientifically measure happiness, it ran into a puzzling and frustrating phenomenon, a fundamental obstacle in the human pursuit of joy. It's called hedonic adaptation, or the hedonic treadmill. In simple terms,
It's the remarkable ability of human beings to get used to almost anything, good or bad. This is a crucial and often invisible feature of our inner landscape. You get a promotion at work. For a few days, maybe even a few weeks, you feel a significant boost in your happiness and life satisfaction. You feel successful, validated, and optimistic. But then, inevitably, that feeling starts to fade. The new salary becomes your new normal. The new responsibilities become your routine. And before long, your baseline level of happiness returns to pretty much exactly where it was before the promotion. The same thing happens when you buy a new car, move into a bigger house, or even win the lottery. Studies of lottery winners have famously shown that after an initial period of euphoria, their happiness levels tend to return to their pre-winning baseline. This process is a double-edged sword. It is a lifesaver when it comes to negative events. It's what allows us to recover from setbacks, to adapt to chronic illness, and to find a new normal after a tragedy. Our ability to adapt to hardship is a key component of our resilience. But when it comes to positive events, it can feel like a curse. It is the reason why chasing happiness through external achievements and acquisitions is so often a futile and exhausting race. We are running on a treadmill. We put in a huge amount of effort to reach a new goal, hoping it will finally deliver lasting contentment. But the treadmill simply speeds up, and we end up back where we started, just a little more out of breath. Understanding hedonic adaptation is a game changer. It shifts our focus from the pursuit of happiness to the practice of happiness. It tells us that the secret to well-being is not about changing our life circumstances, but about changing our daily thoughts and actions. It explains why practices like gratitude and savoring are so powerful. These are the conscious countermeasures to adaptation. Gratitude is the art of not taking our current blessings for granted. Savoring is the art of extracting the maximum joy from a positive experience before it fades. Hedonic adaptation also highlights the importance of pursuing experiences over possessions. We adapt to a new television very quickly, but a memorable trip, a new skill learned, or a meaningful experience with loved ones provides a lasting positive memory that we can return to again and again. This principle is a fundamental law of our psychological physics. It's a powerful modern lens that helps us understand why so many of our efforts to become happier fail. And it is closely related to another modern paradox, one born not of our inner workings, but of the overwhelming abundance of the world we have created.
The paradox of choice. For most of human history, the path to a better life seemed clear. More options, more freedom, more choice. The fundamental assumption of modern Western societies is that to maximize a citizen's well-being, you must maximize their individual freedom. And the way to do that is to maximize the number of choices they have. More choice is always better than less choice. But in the early 2000s, the psychologist Barry Schwartz presented a radical and counterintuitive thesis that he called the paradox of choice. He argued that while some choice is good, an overabundance of choice does not make us freer. It makes us more paralyzed, more anxious, and less satisfied. Imagine you are in a supermarket and you need to buy a jar of jam.
In one scenario, you have 3 options: strawberry, raspberry, and apricot. You can easily compare them and make a confident decision. In another scenario, you are faced with a wall of 250 different kinds of jam. There are exotic flavors, different brands, artisanal options, low-sugar versions. The sheer volume of options can be overwhelming. This is what Schwartz calls the paralysis of choice. The cognitive load of evaluating every option is so great that we often end up either making a random, ill-informed decision or simply walking away without buying anything at all. But the paradox gets worse. Let's say you do manage to choose a jar of jam from the 250 options. Now, you are more likely to be less satisfied with your choice than if you had chosen from only 3. Why? First, because you are now burdened by opportunity costs. With 249 other options, it's easy to imagine that you might have missed out on a slightly better one. The jam you chose is now haunted by the ghosts of all the jams you didn't choose. Second, the abundance of choice leads to an escalation of expectations. If there are 250 options, you feel that you should be able to find the perfect jam. When the jam you chose turns out to be merely good, it feels like a disappointment and a personal failure. Finally, if you are dissatisfied with your choice, you are more likely to blame yourself. With so many options, you feel that you have no one to blame but yourself for making a suboptimal decision. This paradox is everywhere in our modern lives, from choosing a career path to a romantic partner to what to watch on a streaming service. The explosion of choice, which was meant to liberate us, has in many ways become a source of chronic, low-grade stress and dissatisfaction. The solution, Schwartz argues, is to become not a maximizer who is obsessed with finding the absolute best option, but a satisficer. A satisficer has a clear set of criteria and standards, and they choose the first option that meets those standards. They are content with good enough. This modern lens on our map teaches us that freedom is not about having infinite choice, but about having the wisdom to cultivate and commit to a few good choices. It is another powerful argument for moving our focus from the external world of endless options to the internal world of clear values and contentment. And as we continue to explore our internal experience, we now turn to one of the most celebrated and sought-after states of mind in all of modern psychology:
Flow states and optimal experience. We have examined the modern paradoxes that can make happiness elusive, the treadmill of adaptation, and the paralysis of choice. But modern psychology has also identified a state of mind that seems to be an antidote to both, a state of optimal experience that is one of the most powerful sources of fulfillment available to us. It's called flow, a concept pioneered by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Flow is a state of complete absorption in an activity. It is that feeling of being in the zone, where you are so deeply immersed in what you are doing that everything else seems to fade away. Your sense of time becomes distorted. Hours can feel like minutes. Your ego and self-consciousness dissolve. You are not thinking about yourself or your problems. Your awareness is merged with the activity itself, and there is a sense of effortless control and peak performance. It is a deeply rewarding and joyful experience. Csikszentmihalyi discovered flow by studying people from all walks of life: artists, athletes, surgeons, chess masters, and even factory workers. He found that the happiest and most satisfied people were those who regularly experienced flow in their lives. So what are the conditions
that make flow possible. It's not a state you can force, but you can create the circumstances for it to arise. First, the activity must have a clear set of goals and provide immediate feedback. In a game of tennis, you know exactly what you need to do, and you know instantly whether you've succeeded or failed. This clarity of purpose focuses the mind. Second, and most importantly, there must be a balance between the challenge of the task and your own level of skill. If the challenge is too high for your skill level, you feel anxiety. If your skill level is too high for the challenge, you feel boredom. Flow happens in that perfect, narrow channel between anxiety and boredom, where the task is challenging enough to require your full concentration, but not so difficult that it feels impossible. This is why flow is a powerful engine for growth. To stay in the flow channel, you must constantly be improving your skills to meet ever greater challenges. Flow states are the ultimate form of engagement. They are a direct counterpoint to the distracted, multitasking nature of modern life. It is an experience of deep, single-pointed focus. And the joy it provides is not the passive pleasure of consumption, but the active fulfillment of using your skills to their utmost. It is the joy of a climber focused on the next handhold, a musician lost in a melody, a programmer solving a complex piece of code. It is an internally generated happiness. Flow states are a powerful coordinate on our modern map, pointing to a source of fulfillment that is always available to us, independent of external rewards. It is about the quality of our experience, moment by moment. And this brings us to one of the greatest challenges to that quality of experience in our time, the digital world we now inhabit.
Digital life and the pursuit of joy. Our exploration of modern lenses has taken us through existential freedom, the science of well-being, and the psychology of choice and flow. But we cannot complete this part of our journey without addressing the single most transformative force of our era, a force that has fundamentally reshaped our social lives, our inner worlds, and our very pursuit of happiness, our digital life. The digital revolution, with its promise of instant connection, infinite information, and endless entertainment, seemed at first to be a direct path to a happier world. And in many ways, it has brought incredible benefits. It allows us to maintain long-distance relationships, to find communities of like-minded people, and to access a wealth of knowledge that was once unimaginable. But as our lives have become increasingly mediated by screens, a more complex and often darker picture has emerged. Many of the features of our digital world seem almost perfectly designed to undermine the very principles of happiness we have been mapping. We've discussed the trap of social comparison as the root of envy. Social media platforms have institutionalized this on a global scale, creating a perpetual engine of comparison and status anxiety. We've seen the importance of deep, focused engagement, like flow states. The digital world is a relentless machine of distraction, with its notifications, endless scrolls, and multitasking demands constantly fracturing our attention. We've learned the value of authentic, vulnerable connection. Digital interactions are often curated and performative, prioritizing image over substance. The very architecture of many digital platforms is built on the principles of hedonic adaptation and intermittent reinforcement, the same principles that make a slot machine addictive. The likes, the notifications, the endless novelty are designed to provide a constant stream of small, pleasurable dopamine hits, which can keep us coming back for more,
but often leave us feeling empty and anxious in the long run. Navigating this digital landscape with our well-being in mind has become one of the primary challenges of modern life. It requires a new set of skills and a conscious philosophical approach. This is the practice of digital mindfulness or digital minimalism. It is not about rejecting technology wholesale, but about using it intentionally and deliberately to support our values, rather than allowing it to unconsciously shape them. It means curating our digital environment as carefully as we would our physical home. It involves setting clear boundaries, scheduling time for deep work and genuine connection, and regularly disconnecting to allow for solitude, reflection, and engagement with the physical world. The digital world is a powerful new territory on our map. It offers both incredible opportunities for connection and learning, and significant threats to our focus, our authenticity, and our peace of mind. Learning to navigate it wisely is no longer an optional skill. It is an essential part of crafting a happy life in the 21st century. And the very philosophy of digital minimalism points us toward a broader, more profound modern idea.
The minimalist philosophy of enough. Our struggle to navigate the overwhelming, distracting nature of digital life is a symptom of a much larger modern condition, the relentless pursuit of more. We live in a culture of maximalism, a culture that tells us that happiness is always just one more purchase, one more achievement, one more upgrade away. It is the logic of the hedonic treadmill writ large across our entire economy. But in recent years, a powerful countercultural movement has emerged, a philosophy that offers a radical and liberating alternative: minimalism. Minimalism is not about deprivation or living in a stark white room. It is not about getting rid of all your possessions for the sake of it. At its core, minimalism is a philosophy of intentionality. It is the active and ongoing process of identifying what is truly essential in your life, and then deliberately eliminating everything that is not. It is about stripping away the clutter, the physical clutter in our homes, the mental clutter in our minds, the calendar clutter in our schedules, to make space for what we value most. The minimalist asks a simple but profound question: does this thing I own, this commitment I have, this habit I practice, actually add value to my life? Does it support my purpose, my values, my well-being? If the answer is no, the minimalist chooses to let it go. This is a direct rebellion against the paradox of choice. Instead of being paralyzed by endless options, the minimalist intentionally curates a life of fewer, better things. By owning less, they often find they have more time, because they spend less of it shopping, cleaning, and maintaining possessions. More money, because they are no longer mindlessly consuming. And most importantly, more mental space and freedom. Physical clutter is a direct reflection of mental clutter. A cluttered home often corresponds to a cluttered, anxious mind. The process of decluttering our physical environment can have a profound effect on our inner peace. The joy of minimalism is the joy of lightness and freedom. It is the relief that comes from stepping off the treadmill of consumerism. It is the clarity of a life that is aligned with your deepest values, rather than with the latest trends. It is the deep satisfaction of knowing what is enough. This philosophy of enough is a powerful modern lens
that can be applied to every area of our lives: our possessions, our commitments, our information diet, our social lives. It is a path to a richer life, not through addition, but through intentional subtraction. And as we clear away the non-essential, we create the space to more deeply appreciate one of the most readily available, yet often overlooked, sources of everyday joy.
The role of aesthetic beauty in happiness. Our journey through modern lenses has been intense, grappling with freedom, meaning, scientific data, and the challenges of a cluttered digital world. We have focused heavily on the internal, the psychological, and the philosophical. But as we clear away the clutter, following the minimalist path of enough, we create the space to notice something fundamental that has been there all along: the profound impact of beauty on our well-being. This is the role of aesthetics. Aesthetics is the branch of philosophy concerned with the nature of beauty, art, and taste. For much of our pragmatic, productivity-focused modern lives, beauty is often treated as a luxury, a frivolous add-on, something to be enjoyed in a museum or a concert hall, but not a serious component of a happy life. This is a significant oversight. The experience of beauty is a powerful and direct route to positive emotion. When we encounter something beautiful, whether it's a breathtaking natural landscape, a masterful piece of music, a stunning work of architecture, or even a simple, well-designed everyday object, it can evoke feelings of awe, wonder, and a deep sense of rightness. This experience can momentarily lift us out of our petty, ego-driven concerns and connect us to something larger than ourselves. This is what is sometimes called a transcendent experience. It is a moment of self-forgetting, where we are simply absorbed in the act of perception. The philosopher Iris Murdoch argued that appreciating beauty is a moral exercise, because it pulls our attention away from our selfish inner monologue and directs it outward towards something worthy of contemplation. It is an act of unselfing. A life that is rich in aesthetic experience is a life that is constantly being nourished by moments of joy and wonder. This does not require expensive art collections or trips to exotic locations. It is about cultivating an aesthetic sensibility, the ability to notice and appreciate the beauty that is already all around us. It is about paying attention to the quality of light in a room, the elegant design of a simple chair, the intricate patterns on a leaf, the harmonious arrangement of colors in a meal. It is about choosing to surround ourselves as much as possible with things that we find genuinely beautiful and that elevate our spirit. Creating an aesthetically pleasing environment, whether at home or at work, is not a superficial act. It is a form of self-care. It recognizes that our external environment has a powerful effect on our internal state. A calm, orderly, and beautiful space can help to cultivate a calm, orderly, and joyful mind. This final modern lens on our map reminds us that happiness is not just an intellectual or ethical project. It is also a sensory and emotional one. It is found not only in what we think and do, but also in what we see, hear, and feel. With our exploration of these modern perspectives now complete, we have gathered a rich and diverse set of tools. The final stage of our journey must be to bring them all together,
to move from philosophy to action, and to explore the timeless daily practices that can truly craft a joyful life.
Daily rituals of gratitude. Our long journey is nearing its destination. We have traveled through the ancient world, charted the inner mind, navigated our social lives, and viewed our quest through modern lenses. We have assembled a rich and complex map. But a map is useless if it is not used. This final part of our journey is about turning philosophy into practice. It is about taking these grand ideas and weaving them into the fabric of our daily lives. We begin with the simplest and perhaps most powerful practice of all, the daily ritual of gratitude. We've already explored the philosophy of gratitude and the science behind its effectiveness. We know it counteracts hedonic adaptation and shifts our perspective from scarcity to abundance. But knowledge is not enough. To truly reap its benefits, gratitude must be transformed from a fleeting feeling into a deliberate, consistent habit. This is the power of a ritual. A ritual is an intentional action performed regularly that gives meaning and structure to our lives. Creating a daily gratitude ritual is like carving a new, positive groove into the record of our mind. There are many ways to practice this. One of the most famous and well-researched is the 3 good things exercise. At the end of each day, you take just a few minutes to write down 3 things that went well during the day, and, importantly, to briefly reflect on why they happened. This second part is crucial. It's not just about listing positive events. It's about recognizing your own role in them, or the kindness of others, or the simple good fortune of the moment. For example, instead of just writing, "had a good conversation with a friend," you might write, "had a good conversation with a friend because I made the effort to call them, and they were generous with their time." This practice actively trains your brain to scan for the positive, counteracting its natural negativity bias. Another powerful ritual is the gratitude letter. This involves thinking of someone who has made a positive difference in your life and writing them a detailed letter expressing your heartfelt thanks. The greatest benefits, studies show, come from delivering and reading this letter in person. It is an act that amplifies joy for both the giver and the receiver, creating a powerful moment of connection. For those who prefer a more contemplative approach, a simple gratitude meditation can be transformative. This involves sitting quietly and bringing to mind the people, the places, the experiences, and even the simple objects in your life for which you are thankful, and allowing the genuine feeling of appreciation to fill your awareness. The key to any of these practices is consistency. It is not about a grand one-time gesture of thanks. It is about the small daily act of paying attention. It is about making gratitude not just an occasional emotion, but a fundamental part of your perspective. This simple ritual is a cornerstone practice. It is the daily act of tuning your instrument, of recalibrating your mind for joy. And as you begin to see the good that is already present in your life, you are naturally inspired to add to the good in the world around you. Acts of kindness as a habit. The daily ritual of gratitude turns our attention inward to appreciate the good we have received. The natural and powerful next step is to turn that positive energy outward and become a source of good for others. This is the practice of transforming random acts of kindness into a consistent,
intentional habit. We have already established that generosity and contribution are profound sources of fulfillment. The helper's high is a real neurological phenomenon. But just like gratitude, the benefits of kindness are most potent when they become a regular part of our lives, not just a sporadic impulse. To make kindness a habit is to actively look for opportunities to be of service to others in small, everyday ways. This is not about grand, heroic gestures that might happen once a year. It is about the small, consistent actions that weave a stronger, more compassionate social fabric. It is holding a door open for someone. It is offering a genuine compliment to a colleague. It is letting another driver merge into traffic. It is paying for the coffee of the person behind you in line. It is sending a message to a friend you haven't spoken to in a while just to let them know you are thinking of them. Each of these acts on its own may seem insignificant, but they have a powerful ripple effect. First, they have an immediate positive impact on the receiver, creating a moment of unexpected warmth and connection in their day. Second, as we've seen, they provide a direct boost to our own well-being, fostering a sense of purpose and connection. Third, and perhaps most importantly, they can inspire a chain reaction. A person who has been the recipient of an unexpected kindness is statistically more likely to pay it forward and be kind to someone else. By making small acts of kindness a habit, you become a catalyst for a more positive and compassionate community. How can we cultivate this habit? One effective method is to set a simple daily intention. To wake up in the morning and decide, today, I will perform at least one deliberate act of kindness for someone. This simple intention primes your mind to be on the lookout for opportunities you might otherwise miss. Another powerful practice is to expand your circle of compassion. We find it easy to be kind to our close friends and family. The practice is to extend that kindness to strangers, to people we find difficult, and even to ourselves. Practicing self-kindness or self-compassion is a crucial and often overlooked part of this habit. It involves treating yourself with the same care and understanding you would offer a good friend when you make a mistake or are going through a hard time. To make kindness a habit is to live the answer to the question, how can I be useful? It is a practice that takes us out of our self-centered bubble and connects us to our shared humanity. And as we begin to extend our compassion to the people around us, we can also find a profound source of joy and wisdom by extending our awareness to the non-human world.
Nature as a teacher of joy. We have practiced turning our awareness inward through gratitude and outward through kindness. Now, we explore the practice of turning our awareness to the vast, living world that surrounds us, nature. For most of our species' history, we lived in intimate connection with the natural world. Our modern lives, spent largely indoors and mediated by screens, have created a profound disconnect from this fundamental part of our heritage. Re-establishing this connection is a powerful and restorative practice for a joyful life. Nature is a powerful teacher. Its rhythms and cycles offer profound lessons in the very principles we have been mapping. Nature teaches us about impermanence, the changing of the seasons, the life cycle of a plant, the rising and setting of the sun. All are constant reminders that change is the only constant. Spending time in nature can help us to accept the flow of our own lives with greater ease. Nature teaches us about resilience. We see a tree growing from a crack in a rock,
a forest recovering after a fire. Nature is a testament to the persistent, life-affirming force that endures through hardship. Nature also teaches us about interconnectedness. In a forest ecosystem, every element, the trees, the soil, the fungi, the insects, is dependent on every other element. It is a living demonstration that we too are part of a larger web of life, not separate from it. Beyond these philosophical lessons, spending time in nature has been scientifically shown to have significant benefits for our mental and physical health. The practice of forest bathing, or Shinrin-yoku in Japan, involves simply walking slowly and mindfully through a forest, taking in the atmosphere with all one's senses. Studies have shown that this practice can reduce levels of the stress hormone cortisol, lower blood pressure, and boost the immune system. The experience of awe is another powerful gift of nature. To stand at the edge of an ocean, to look up at a star-filled night sky, or to gaze upon a majestic mountain range can evoke a profound sense of wonder. This experience of awe has been shown to make us feel more connected to others, more generous, and can shrink our own problems down to a more manageable size. The practice is simple: to intentionally make time to be in nature and to be truly present when you are there. It means putting away the phone, taking out the earbuds, and engaging your senses. It is feeling the breeze on your skin, listening to the sound of birdsong, noticing the intricate details of a flower, smelling the scent of rain on the earth. This practice is a powerful antidote to the stress, distraction, and artificiality of modern life. It is a homecoming to our original source, a deep well of tranquility and joy. And often, the deepest way to connect with the wisdom of nature is to emulate its quietude.
The healing power of silence. Our modern world is a world of noise. We are inundated with a constant barrage of sound. Traffic, notifications, advertisements, chatter. Even when we are alone, we tend to fill the silence with podcasts, music, or television. A life lived in this state of perpetual noise can lead to a scattered mind, a frayed nervous system, and a deep disconnection from our own inner voice. The intentional practice of silence is the radical and healing antidote. Silence, in this context, is not just the absence of noise. It is a rich and generative state of being. It is a conscious retreat from the world of external input in order to create the space for internal clarity. Just as our bodies need sleep to rest and repair, our minds need silence to process, to consolidate, and to find their center. The practice of silence can take many forms. It can be as simple as choosing to drive to work without the radio on, or taking a 10-minute silence break in the middle of a busy day. It can be a longer practice, like a silent walk in nature, where the goal is to simply listen to the world around you and the quiet of your own mind. For a deeper experience, one might undertake a silent meditation retreat, spending a day or even a week in communal silence with others. This extended practice can be challenging, as it forces us to confront the restlessness and noise of our own minds without our usual distractions. But on the other side of that restlessness is a profound sense of peace and self-awareness. What happens in this silence? First, we begin to truly listen. We listen to the subtle sounds of our environment
that are usually drowned out. More importantly, we begin to listen to ourselves. In the quiet, our own deeper thoughts, feelings, and intuitions have a chance to surface. The whispers of our own inner wisdom can finally be heard above the shouting of the external world. Silence is a gateway to the self-knowledge we spoke of earlier. Second, silence is deeply restorative. It gives our nervous system a break from the constant stimulation of modern life. It can reduce stress, improve focus, and enhance our ability to think creatively and solve problems. Third, the practice of silence can transform our relationship with speech. When we spend time in silence, we become more aware of the power and impact of our words. We may find ourselves speaking more intentionally, more thoughtfully, and more kindly when we do choose to break the silence. In a world that values constant communication and productivity, choosing silence is a powerful act of self-care and rebellion. It is the practice of creating a sacred space in our lives, a quiet inner harbor where we can retreat, recharge, and reconnect with what truly matters. And in that quiet space, we can begin to work with one of the most powerful tools we possess for creating meaning.
Storytelling and the happiness of meaning. We have created a quiet space through the practice of silence. In this space, we can begin to work with the fundamental operating system of the human mind, narrative or storytelling. We do not experience life as a random sequence of events. We experience it as a story. From the moment we wake up, we are narrating our lives to ourselves. I am the kind of person who is good at my job. I am someone who always has bad luck in relationships. My life is a story of overcoming adversity. The quality of this inner story is one of the most powerful determinants of our happiness. We have already touched upon this with the idea of perspective and reframing. The practice of storytelling takes this a step further. It is the conscious, intentional act of becoming the author of your own life's narrative. This involves two key skills. The first is narrative awareness. This is the practice of listening to the stories you are currently telling yourself about your life, your past, and your future. It is about noticing the recurring themes, the characters you cast yourself as, hero, victim, jester, and the overall tone of your story, comedy, tragedy, adventure. Often, we are running on old, unexamined stories that were written for us by our childhood experiences or by cultural expectations. The second skill is narrative reframing or story editing. Once we are aware of our current story, we can begin to consciously edit it. This is not about denying the facts of our past. It is about changing the meaning we assign to those facts. A story of a painful breakup can be framed as a tragedy of loss, or it can be reframed as a story of resilience, learning, and the opening of a new chapter. A story of a career failure can be framed as a story of personal inadequacy, or it can be reframed as a necessary detour that led to a more authentic path. The meaning is not in the event. It is in the story we weave around it. A powerful practice for this is therapeutic or expressive writing. This involves writing freely and deeply about challenging life experiences. Studies have shown that this practice can lead to significant improvements in both mental and physical health. By putting our experiences into a coherent narrative, we gain a sense of understanding and control.
We move from being a passive character to whom things happen to being the active narrator who creates meaning from them. The happiness of meaning that Viktor Frankl spoke of is, in essence, the happiness of a well-told story. It is the joy of seeing your life not as a random series of events, but as a purposeful journey. To practice the art of storytelling is to take up the pen and become the author of your own flourishing. And as we shape the story of our lives, we can also explore one of the most powerful ways to shape the emotional tone of our moments.
Music and the philosophy of emotion. As we learn to author the narrative of our lives, we must also pay attention to the soundtrack. No art form has a more direct and immediate impact on our emotional state than music. It is a universal language that can bypass the rational mind and speak directly to the heart. To consciously engage with music is a profound practice for cultivating joy and emotional balance. Music is, in a sense, a philosophy of emotion in audible form. It can express shades of feeling that words cannot capture. The complex blend of joy and sadness in a nostalgic melody, the feeling of defiant hope in a powerful symphony, the serene peace of an ambient composition. By listening deeply to music, we can expand and refine our own emotional vocabulary. It can help us to feel and process emotions that we might otherwise keep suppressed. The practice of using music to shape our well-being can be both active and passive. The passive practice is conscious listening. This is different from having music on as background noise. It involves setting aside time to listen to a piece of music with the same full, mindful attention we would bring to a meditation session. It is about noticing the textures, the rhythms, the melodies, and the emotional journey the music takes you on. This practice can be incredibly restorative and can provide a deep sense of aesthetic joy. The active practice is emotional regulation through music. This is the intentional use of music to help shift or support our emotional state. We all do this intuitively to some extent. We put on upbeat music to get energized for a workout, or sad music to help us grieve. The practice is to do this more consciously. We can create playlists that are specifically designed to help us focus, to relax, to feel more optimistic, or to process difficult feelings. This is not about suppressing negative emotions, but about creating a supportive container for them. Music can provide a sense of companionship in our sadness and a voice for our joy. Furthermore, the act of making music, regardless of skill level, is a powerful practice. To sing, to play an instrument, to drum. These activities engage our minds and bodies in a state of creative flow. They are a direct expression of our inner life and a powerful way to connect with others. The practice of engaging with music is an acknowledgement that a happy life is not just about having the right thoughts. It is about feeling a rich and varied spectrum of emotions. Music is one of our most powerful allies in navigating this inner emotional landscape. It is a tool for shaping the moments of our story. And this leads us to the broader skill of consciously shaping our inner world as a whole. The discipline of perspective. We have explored specific practices that can shape our experience: gratitude, kindness, storytelling, music. Now we zoom out to the meta skill that underlies all of them: the discipline of perspective. This is the conscious and deliberate practice of choosing how we view the circumstances of our lives. We have established the philosophical principle. It is not events,
but our judgment of events that causes our suffering. The discipline of perspective is the active daily work of putting that principle into practice. It is a discipline because it requires consistent training and effort, like strengthening a muscle. Our minds have habitual, automatic ways of seeing the world, often through a negative or fearful lens. The practice is to catch these automatic interpretations and consciously challenge them. One of the most powerful techniques for this is what the Stoics called the view from above. This is a meditative exercise where you imagine yourself floating up out of your body, looking down on your current situation. You continue to float higher, seeing your house, your city, your country, until you are looking down at the earth as a small blue marble in the vastness of space. From this cosmic perspective, the problem that seemed so overwhelming a moment ago, the argument, the missed deadline, the social embarrassment, shrinks to its true, insignificant size. This practice does not dismiss our problems, but it puts them in their proper context, reducing their emotional power over us. Another powerful practice is negative visualization, also from the Stoics. This involves spending a few moments each day contemplating the potential loss of the things you value most: your health, your loved ones, your freedom. The goal is not to be morbid, but to achieve two things. First, it prepares you for the inevitable hardships of life, making you more resilient when they do occur. Second, and more importantly, it is a powerful antidote to taking things for granted. By imagining life without your partner, you appreciate their presence more deeply today. By contemplating the fragility of your health, you feel a greater sense of gratitude for your current vitality. A third technique is to actively seek a different frame. When faced with a setback, the disciplined practice is to ask questions like, "What can I learn from this? Is there any opportunity hidden within this difficulty? How might this look to me in 10 years? This is the art of transforming obstacles into fuel for growth. The discipline of perspective is perhaps the ultimate form of mental freedom. It is the realization that even when we cannot control the events of our lives, we always retain the power to control the meaning we assign to them. It is the master skill that allows us to navigate any territory on our map with grace and wisdom. But sometimes, the wisest use of this discipline is to recognize when it is time not to reframe, but to release.
Rituals of letting go. The discipline of perspective empowers us to reframe our difficulties and find meaning in our struggles. But there are some burdens that are not meant to be reframed. They are meant to be set down. We accumulate so much emotional and mental baggage on our journey through life: old resentments, past failures, lingering regrets, outdated identities. To cling to these is to weigh ourselves down, making it difficult to move forward with lightness and joy. The practice of letting go is the necessary and liberating art of emotional and mental decluttering. Just as minimalism involves intentionally removing unnecessary physical possessions, this practice involves intentionally releasing the inner burdens that no longer serve us. Forgiveness, which we have already discussed, is a primary form of this. It is the ritual of letting go of the burden of resentment toward others. But we must also practice letting go in other areas. We must let go of our past mistakes. We all have moments we regret, choices we wish we could undo. To ruminate on them endlessly is a form of self-punishment that serves no purpose. The practice is to learn the lesson the mistake offered,
and then to forgive ourselves and release the story. We must let go of our attachment to specific outcomes. We make our plans, we set our goals, but the universe does not always comply. The practice of detachment, which we explored earlier, is the ritual of letting go of our rigid expectations and embracing the reality of what is, rather than clinging to what we wished would be. We must also let go of outdated versions of ourselves. We are not the same person we were 5 years ago. As we grow and change, we must be willing to shed old identities, beliefs, and roles that no longer fit who we are becoming. To cling to an old self out of habit or fear can be a major obstacle to growth. How do we practice this? Rituals can be incredibly powerful. A simple ritual could involve writing down the things you wish to release on a piece of paper, and then safely burning it, watching the smoke carry the burdens away. Another practice is a form of letting go meditation, where you visualize your burdens as heavy stones in a backpack. With each exhale, you imagine yourself taking out one stone and setting it down, feeling the lightness that results. The practice of letting go is an act of profound trust. It is the trust that we will be okay without the old armor of our resentments. It is the trust that by releasing our grip on the past, we open our hands to receive the gifts of the present. And there is no greater catalyst for this practice, no greater teacher of the preciousness of the present than the contemplation of our own mortality.
Death awareness and the preciousness of life. We arrive at the final practice on our journey, and it is the one that our culture goes to the greatest lengths to avoid, the practice of contemplating our own death. This may seem like a dark and morbid way to end a discussion on happiness, but for many of the world's great philosophical and spiritual traditions, the awareness of death is the secret ingredient that gives life its savor and its urgency. The Stoics practiced memento mori, remember you must die. Buddhist monks in some traditions meditate on images of corpses in various stages of decay. The purpose of these practices is not to foster a sense of fear or despair, but to achieve the exact opposite, to awaken a profound appreciation for the incredible, fleeting gift of being alive. The awareness of death is a powerful tool for clarifying our priorities. When we live as if we have an infinite amount of time, it is easy to procrastinate, to put off what truly matters, to get caught up in trivialities. We waste our days on petty arguments, mindless distractions, and the pursuit of goals that we don't truly value. The practice of memento mori cuts through this fog. To ask yourself, if I were to die tomorrow, would I be happy with how I am spending my time today? Is a question of radical clarity. It forces us to distinguish between the essential and the non-essential. It motivates us to stop deferring our joy, to have the important conversation, to take the creative risk, to appreciate the people we love right now. Death awareness is also the ultimate cure for taking life for granted. It is the finitude of life that gives it its preciousness. We would not cherish a beautiful sunset so much if we knew it would last forever. It is the knowledge that our time with our loved ones is limited that makes each moment with them so valuable. By keeping the reality of death in our awareness, we are constantly reminded not to sleepwalk through our lives. We savor our experiences more deeply, we love more fully, and we forgive more easily,
Because we understand the precious, non-renewable nature of time. This is not about living in fear. It is about living with a sense of vibrant, engaged urgency. It is about being fully present for the astonishing privilege of this one wild and precious life. The contemplation of our end is not a rejection of life, but the most powerful affirmation of it. It is the final, sharpest lens we can use to bring our entire map into focus. And with this final practice, we are ready to take all the pieces we have gathered and step into the role of the mapmaker.
Crafting your own philosophy of happiness. We have reached the end of our journey together, but in another sense, the true journey is only just beginning. We have traveled across 49 distinct coordinates on the great map of happiness. We have gathered wisdom from ancient sages and modern scientists. We have explored the landscapes of the mind, the sea of relationships, and the practices of a well-lived life. But the final, most important step is not to simply possess this map. It is to use it to draw your own. This final idea is the culmination of all the others. The ultimate project is to become the conscious and intentional creator of your own personal philosophy of happiness. There is no single one-size-fits-all answer to the question of how to live. The ideas we have explored are not a rigid set of rules to be followed blindly. They are a toolkit, a palette of colors, a collection of powerful ingredients. Your task now is to be the artist, the chef, the architect. It is to take these ideas and experiment with them, to see which ones resonate most deeply with your own nature, your own values, and your own unique life circumstances. For one person, the Stoic ideal of the inner citadel may be the most important principle. For another, the Taoist concept of flow and wu-wei may be the guiding star. For a third, a life built around the Confucian ideal of social harmony and contribution might bring the deepest fulfillment. Your personal philosophy will be a living, breathing thing. It will be a synthesis of the ideas that you find most true and most useful. It might involve a commitment to a daily gratitude practice, a weekly ritual of spending time in nature, a conscious effort to cultivate virtue friendships, and a guiding principle of finding meaning in adversity. You will choose your own definition of a good life based on the wisdom you have gathered. This is the ultimate expression of the existential freedom we discussed. It is the act of taking full responsibility for your own well-being. It is to move from being a passive consumer of ideas to an active creator of a meaningful life. This does not mean you will have all the answers. It does not mean you will never feel sadness or face hardship again. A good philosophy of life is not a shield from reality. It is a compass to navigate reality. It is the inner framework that helps you make difficult choices, find resilience in the face of setbacks, and savor the moments of joy. The great journey is not about arriving at a final destination called happiness. It is about the ongoing, creative, and deeply personal process of crafting a life of meaning, connection, and flourishing. The map is in your hands. The journey is yours to continue.